Good morning, or good afternoon, maybe good evening, wherever you're tuning in from today. But no matter where you are, if you're a lawyer who cares about where our profession is going, you're in the right place. My name is Brett, and I'm the CEO of Goodlawyer. And for the next 4 hours, some of the sharpest minds in law are here to explore one thing: the future. Not the doom and gloom, not the robots are coming for your job, the real future, where lawyers like us still matter. You know, back in the law firm days, they called me Mr. Ideas Guy, code for please stop talking. Fortunately, I now pay a team to listen to me, and they turn some of those crazy ideas into moments like this. A moment to rethink the profession we love, especially now, when the future of our profession feels up for grabs. This is our chance to shape our future. When I left the big firm, there was no grand plan, just a feeling that something was broken. Law is one of humanity's great inventions, the invisible structure that allows 8 billion people to live, trade, and build together. So why does the system, built for fairness, so often feel unfair to the lawyers inside it? That question became our mission. And after 10 years spanning big law, in-house, and building Goodlawyer, I've learned the parts that actually matter boil down to 3 things: people, purpose, and progress. In the end, it all comes back to the people. Think of who got you here: the 1L friend who shared their cans, the professor who saw your gifts before you did, the mentor who risked her reputation because she believed in you. And now look around. You are those people for someone else. Because the kind of lawyer who shows up to a summit called The Future of Law is the kind who leans in, who thinks beyond their own desk, who wants to leave the profession better than they found it. People are our enduring advantage, and the relationships that we build make the work worth doing. Purpose, that thing that turns a degree into a calling. Your job isn't to bill hours. It never was. Your purpose comes from the weight you carry, the leaders who rely on your judgment, the teams who depend on your steadiness, and the people waiting for you at home. Now, most lawyers didn't enter this profession to push paper. I certainly didn't. We came here to make a dent in the universe, to influence outcomes that matter, to leave things better than you found them. Progress in law is simple. It means lawyers living better lives. It's teams working across functions instead of in silos. It's legal refusing to worship at the altar of burnout. And yes, AI, automation, new models, they'll play their part. But the tools aren't the revolution. The real shift is how we choose every day to practice. If purpose is why we do the work, progress is how we make the work better for ourselves, for our teams, for everyone who depends on us. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for believing in a bright future. And now, it's my privilege to hand the mic over to your summit co-host, Mr. Aboud, a leader and a friend whose mix of empathy and edge is remarkably rare in this profession, and Pauline, our sparkle, whose commitment to improving the lives of lawyers is the heartbeat of what we do at Goodlawyer every single day. Because at Goodlawyer, we're building a talent platform and a community for incredible lawyers to build intentional careers and for companies to access talent they can't find anywhere else. So, Chad, Pauline, without further ado, show us what the future of law looks like.
Wow, cheers, Brett, and hello, friends. Welcome to the Goodlawyer 2025 Future of Law Summit. I'm Chad Aboud, Chief Commercial Officer here at Goodlawyer, and I really want to thank Brett for that heartfelt welcome. You know, he's our CEO, he's our co-founder, but he's also a fearless leader. And not just for Goodlawyer, but for lawyers everywhere that are looking to break the mold. Brett, thank you for your belief in this community, for your warm intro, kicking things off. And now, speaking of intros, one of my favorite things to do. Again this year, I have the pleasure and the privilege of introducing my co-host today, someone who's not only one of the boldest, sharpest, most sparkling minds in the legal industry, but she's the heartbeat of what makes Goodlawyer tick. She's constantly reimagining how legal professionals learn, grow, and take care of themselves. And somehow she makes that fun every single day. Pauline Chan, everyone.
Chad, you are way too kind. I'm super, super happy to be here with you, even as I realize I have not been practicing my how to accept praise face, something like this, instead of this. If you don't already know Chad, you are in for a treat. He is a rare breed of human who is as passionate about people as he is about modernizing the legal profession. As a former GC and now a sought-after advisor, speaker, and community builder, Chad always shows up with curiosity. And this is why he has such deep insight into how lawyers can lead with authenticity, adaptability, and purpose in a rapidly changing world. He's been sparking important conversations across the legal landscape. And now he's here to help make this summit a fresh, energizing, and action-oriented experience for lawyers who want to do things differently. We could not have a better co-pilot for this journey into the future of law. Now, of course, there is no talking about the future without first considering history. We'd like to take this moment to acknowledge that we are hosted today on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Now, we can't really talk about the future of law without acknowledging that this must include a better future for the next generation of lawyers. This is inspired by the 7th generation principle. Think 7 generations ahead. It is an ancient Haudenosaunee philosophy that the decisions we make today should result in a sustainable world, 7 generations into the future. We invite you to consider your takeaways today with this critical principle in mind. Now, speaking of you, we are so excited to be here with everyone who is tuning in from around the world. We have over 2,000 legal professionals joining us live today from across Canada, the US, and all around the globe. Now, whether you're watching solo with your team or from a summit lounge in Toronto or Vancouver, thank you for being here. We are all about building a better future of law for everyone, and just by being here, you are part of the movement too. Now, before we dive in, I also want to send a big thank you to the partners who helped make today possible. First, we have our flagship sponsor, Castles. They're hosting one of our Toronto Summit Lounges today, just down the hall, and bringing some serious leadership energy into this conversation. And to our amazing partner sponsors. We've got Wordsmith, Miller Thomson, Thomson Reuters, MLT Aikens, ACC Ontario, and ACC British Columbia. Thank you for investing in a better, bolder legal future for everybody.
Well said. Now, we have an incredible day planned for you. So let's dive into what we're going to cover during what we believe is going to be the most fun CLE out here. Because the summit isn't just about trends. It's about connection and transforming how you experience your work. So we've curated 6 conversations that will challenge how we think, how we lead, and how we design our careers. So let's walk you through the day and share what we're excited to explore with you.
All right, so first up, Chad will host a dynamic panel on AI in the law. Who gets the power? We know AI is already reshaping how legal work gets done. But the real question isn't just what we use, it's who controls it and what must stay human. This panel will dig into the big questions around innovation, ethics, and what it means to practice law in an AI-enhanced world, while still protecting clients and the rule of law.
I'm really pumped to be hosting that one. You know, I implemented a CLM myself as a GC, and it was actually one of the most impactful and fulfilling projects I ever did as an in-house lawyer. And now what we have is some of the leading AI legal tech leaders that you know and love that are going to help us share what are the right actions we have to take now so that we don't risk losing the quality of the very foundations of how we interact and how we lawyer. These folks are not just friends, but they're leaders for the entire industry, and they're leading and building some of the most exciting legal tech companies around. This panel is going to be spicy, it's going to be smart, and it's going to be brutally honest.
I'm so excited. There's nothing I love more than some brutal honesty. Next, I'll be sitting down for a one-on-one fireside chat with Lina Yousefi called Resilience is Not the Goal. Be resilient gets thrown around like a badge of honor. But what if that narrative is part of the problem? We're going to talk about how the legal profession fuels burnout and what it really means to lead with care, courage, and a new definition of success. This one is super, super close to my heart. It is about undoing harmful patterns and making space for something healthier. The next generations of our profession deserve it and are owed it.
That's going to be a really special one. You know, Lina is just such an outspoken advocate for everything well-being while building one of the biggest female-run law firms that there is. And so, you know, you two together is going to be amazing. From there, I look forward to bringing together some of the legal leaders I have posted up on my personal mood board at home, because they're going to tell us about how legal wins the C-suite. This session is all about how lawyers make the leap, not just to the table, but into strategic leadership at the table. We're going to explore how they turn risk into opportunity, influence into decisions, and create real business value. These are folks who prove that legal doesn't have to sit on the sidelines. It can and should lead.
Just like our good lawyers. Next, we're going to shift gears with a panel that I can't wait to moderate. Values, vacation, days, and vibes. This one's all about culture, talent, and the generational shifts that are shaping today's workplaces. From the boomers to Gen Z, we'll talk about what really matters when it comes to retention, connection, and shared values, and how firms can build cultures that actually last. I'm looking forward to digging into the human side of leadership, what people need now, and how leaders can listen better. Get ready for some hot takes and some hot flashes if you are where I am in life.
After that, I'll be back to host a panel near and dear to my heart called Ditch the Ladder, Build the Life. This is about career design, plain and simple, and we're going to hear from leaders who have stepped off the traditional path and built something more flexible and impactful for what's meaningful to them by using platforms, branding, new business models. And this one's personal to me because I've been the lawyer stuck on the ladder. I've experienced what's possible when you make the leap towards something that has a mission that draws you in.
Yep. Many of us have seen the pictures of early days lawyer Chad and then redesigning his life Chad, who is sitting against a fence on a sidewalk somewhere on his world travels. That could also be you. Now, finally, we'll wrap up the day with Building the Future We Want, led by our amazing COO, Josh Weinberger. Josh is going to bring it home by exploring the biggest risk in law, staying still. He'll challenge us to ditch comfort, question legacy systems, and get uncomfortable in the name of progress. I'm feeling shifty already. If you want the perfect push to close out the day, that's it.
We saw it last year, and no doubt it'll be that way again. Get the tissue box ready. So whether you're here to level up, deeply reflect, build something new, or just feel more seen, we've got you. Please make it personal. Say hi in the chat right now. Tell folks where you're from, why you're tuning in, and what you're hoping to take away.
And remember, the more you put in, the more you'll get out. Today is about showing up. Be brave. Take another step on your journey, whatever that is, wherever that is. Ask questions, share reflections, tag someone in a moment that hits home, and let this day be a spark or a shift for you, but also for others. And we have amazing merch to give away too. So share the ideas you're most excited about and the insights you've taken away. share them in a LinkedIn post, and tag Goodlawyer so we see it.
All right, my friends, let's get this started. So to kick things off officially, from the Toronto Summit Lounge at Castle's, we're handing it back to the guy who opened the door to all of this, our leader and friend, Brett Colvin. Take it away, buddy.
We have amazing merch to give away too. So share the idea.
Cut the audio. Brett.
Share them in a LinkedIn post. Hey, good lawyers.
We got a
we live?
delay over here, so I'm back, and I'm here with two GCs who have been part of the Good Lawyer journey for a long, long time, and I just want to ask them what the future of law means to each of them, at different stages in their journey. So why don't we start with Charmaine Toms, who was one of the first believers in what we were doing at Good Lawyer, and about 2 weeks after her retirement, decided to get back in the ring and chair our inaugural Future of Law Awards, which we'll be hosting tonight. Charmaine, thank you for everything, but what does the future of law mean to you?
The future of law is exciting, it's disruptive, and it's whatever you want it to be. And that's so different than the last 200 plus years where you were told what it was going to be and what the path was. And now it's all wide open, it's exciting, it's scary, but it's going to be amazing.
Do you think that, any law students that are watching this today should feel like the future is brighter now than it was 50 years ago, or what's your take on that?
Absolutely. I think that there's an opportunity to take some of the drudgery, some of the traditional points of the practice of law that I don't think were very healthy for individuals. There's the opportunity to make that something different.
I love that you hit that. That was my first recollection of law school, the 3 Ds: duty, deadlines, and drudgery.
Not necessarily in that order.
No, but the drudgery was the one that I didn't like. So I'm glad to hear that you see a bright future, because I do too. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And Mr. LeBert, Gavin. Gavin, years ago, started as a Good Lawyer with us, and now he's the GC of a Goldman Sachs portfolio company. It's been incredible to watch your rocket ship journey personally, and excited to see you at the awards event tonight as one of our emerging leader nominees. So Gavin, a little earlier in your career, my friend.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about the future of law?
Oh, I'm feeling great. And huge shout out to the entire Good Lawyer team for being such a big part of my career so far.
I didn't pay him for that, by the way.
Yeah, that one's for free. The next one will cost. No, the future of law to me is it's about quality of life. I think whether that's through automating tasks that are sort of tedious, or finding ways to work with a team that you enjoy and add value, and find new ways to do things. It's at the end of the day, it's about quality of life. What's all this for if we can't have a little fun at the end of the day, right?
Are you scared the robots will take your job?
I'm terrified. I'm very terrified of all the robots. No, I think
They can't grow a mustache like that.
at the end, yeah. Well, I hope I'm a little bit more than a mustache, but yeah, no, look, there's great tools out there being developed that are going to be completely transformative to how we do our jobs. But at the end of the day, we're still going to be people that are, picking up the hammer and swinging. It might be like a crazy hammer that can build a house in a button, but you got to design the house. You got to know why you're building a house, and people really value the advice and consultation that lawyers provide. And so I think that that's something that'll stand the test of time.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you both for letting me put you on the spot like that. We're here at the Toronto Watch Party. We've got a room full of incredible lawyers who are believing that we can do something different with this profession. So are we excited to be here, folks? Yeah. Thank you so much. Back over to you for the AI panel. Thank you again so much for coming out, folks.
Thanks, Brett. And shout out to everyone for joining us from the Toronto Lounge, just on the other side of the wall that I'm facing. So let's kick it off. AI and the law, who gets the power? This isn't about the tools, it's about the control. And where do we draw the line? Who's driving the innovation? What stays human? And how do we make sure that lawyers and our industry, we don't lose the plot while chasing the tech? To help us unpack it, we've brought together 3 people at the sharp edge of where AI meets legal. If you've ever been on LinkedIn, or if you've ever been to a legal event, you'll know Jessica Nguyen. DGC at DocuSign, a fearless operator and advocate for authenticity in legal leadership. She's helped scale some of the world's most trusted brands and now leads at the intersection of legal, innovation, tech, and product. Ross McNairn, CEO of Wordsmith AI, a lawyer turned product leader who's built tech companies and now leads one of the fastest growing AI platforms for legal teams. He knows what it takes to go from theory to a working product, and he isn't afraid to call the BS where it's needed. And last but not least, John Lindsay, VP of Sales at Insight Legal Tech, but I think as we all know, if you've ever seen him online, he's a seasoned executive in a variety of industries. He's an investor, and he's dedicated the last half decade to helping law firms and legal tech companies make smarter, faster AI decisions. He's been on both the buy side and the sell side of the table. He understands what it takes to build trust with buyers while moving the tech forward. Thank you all for being here. Let's get into it. Okay, Jess, gonna put you on the spot first.
I love it. I'm ready.
Let's do this. So when you're building AI at DocuSign, how do you decide what should stay human and what should be automated, what should be enhanced, and when does the tech get to take over?
Ooh, you just start, Chad, right to the hard questions. Where's the softball? Okay. All right. Well, the good news, folks, is I did get to see the questions before the event. All right. So I thought about this question, Chad, and there were 3 aspects that I really think about. 1, what is the tech actually capable of doing that is comparable to what a human can do? That's table stakes. 2, is the human actually comfortable with the tech taking over that specific task? So of course, a lot of us talk about the rote tasks, the mundane tasks, the extraction of dates, etc. Sure, easy peasy. And then the 3rd pillar is, are we building the AI tech in the right way and with integrity? So when I think about that is, that means a lot of different things. It means, was the data used to train that AI lawfully procured, not stolen, not scraped from some sort of Napster-like library? I have a confession. 20 years ago, I did use Napster, okay? I was a broke college student. But, you know, a lot of these companies now don't have that excuse. They're all about speed and scale and grabbing as much market share as possible. They're not the broke college Jessica student. And then the last aspect of the right too is, I know, the last aspect too is, Chad, and folks, is what does this mean too for the longevity of human careers as well? I think about that all the time, obsess over it. I don't talk about it on LinkedIn enough about of what the job prospects look like for junior lawyers or fresh out of law school grads too. So, and legal operations managers, paralegals, contract managers, and what role they play, and how do we adapt those professions to be AI champions and tool maintenance, maintainers and trainers, etc.
Yeah. I want to grab on that last part, actually. I love that you said that. Okay, so this is a big fear point, right? Which is like, a lot of us grew up in law firms doing diligence, building closing documents. These were the elements that we were told were going to make us great lawyers. And then you brought in a great part here, which is if you bring in the technology to eliminate some of those components, then we go to, well, how are you ever going to learn how to lawyer? And then when I think about Ross, what you're building at a hyper-growth AI legal tech company at Wordsmith, there's a lot of great stuff I've seen inside the product. You showed it to me. There's a lot of pieces there that, as I remember, summer student Chad probably would have been doing. And you're removing some of those pieces very intentionally. And so, Ross, when you think about what Jessica was just saying around a big fear element in the industry, what is like a misconception or an unpopular hot take that you have that says it's okay to build this, we're going to be okay?
Yeah, so I am exactly the same. I remember when I trained as a lawyer, it wasn't as if I had a perfect grasp and I was getting through 100% of the work that was being thrown at me in the time frame that people wanted me to do it. And I've spoken to thousands of in-house lawyers now, and I've yet to meet one that says, hey, I've got time on my hands and there's a bunch of work and, I'm looking for something that people are always overwhelmed. And I think there's always more sitting around a business in particular that if you could get your hands on and you could get coverage, you would. You just don't have time and space to do that. So one of the lowest hanging fruits that we've found are the things that actually you just couldn't even touch properly before. So low value contracting or certain types of work that are kind of falling through the cracks is a really great candidate because AI is just helping you increase your coverage and getting rid of these elements that sit there. And if it's currently making it through with a huge backlog for you to need to spend 3 or 4 hours on it, very often there's a good reason for that. There's a commercial necessity or it's high value or things of that nature. And you're probably still going to want to invest the same amount of time on that work. Once you start using AI, it's just you want to change the way in which you do that so you hit the key points. And so I think the parallel I bring back to frequently is that the word processor was a similar step forward. When before we had the word processor, the lawyers were doing a lot of this stuff very, 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 very manually. When that came in, our productivity jumped. We've actually ended up with per capita, if you go back and look at it, almost double the number of lawyers per capita once we introduced word processors. So I think legal is a bit like mobile internet. The cheaper you make it and the more available you make it, the more people will consume of it. And I think that's a massive misconception that people have about this.
I like that part. I tell people sometimes when I think about tech in the most positive sense is the term redlining, we just throw it around all the time. Yeah, you send this red line here, give me the red line, I hate your red lines. Redlining, it used to be a thing. People would take the ruler out and they'd take the red pen and they would actually do it. There is no one on the other side of that wall or the thousands of people watching that wants to do the actual, no, we want the product to run a comparison or to tell us in real time what's happening and what we should do. Nobody wants to go back there. And so when I think about the most positive ways that technology and AI in particular can help us, it's in taking out things that today are very obvious we would never want to do again, but it's having the belief and the leadership of folks like yourselves that are going to focus the technology on the most positive elements of where we want to go. And John, I want to come to you on this because I think one of the biggest pieces that you've built for our industry is around trust. You're real, you share what you care about, you share what you believe in. But I think the trust part is the thing in our industry that while we want to be trusted advisors, we're not sure yet how much we trust the tech. And so when you're building and investing in AI and legal tech, what do you think is the best way you've found so far to build trust with legal buyers?
Yeah, great question, Chad. It's really simple, in terms of what we're looking at today, because let's think about for a second some of the things that people think about when they think about AI outside of the good stuff, right? They think about, bias. They think about black box solutions that nobody knows what's in. They think about the hallucination side of it. So, what do you have to do to try to put some of those fears at rest? I think that's really the critical piece in terms of people like us that are both AI developers and AI practitioners. What do we want to do? We want to make people comfortable using this technology. We don't want people to be thinking about all those negative things. And so how do you do that? What should we be focused on? And so for us, at least, it's really been simple. It's been transparency. That's what we're looking for. What leads people to believe in a solution? Well, you got to be able to figure out what it does, right? So the outcomes here, think about what we've seen over the last year, 2 years, from AI solutions in general. We've seen them hallucinate a bit. We've seen them put out outcomes that nobody can determine how they actually arrived at those outcomes. And so I think, when I look at both build or, invest or buy, it's always, is this a solution that, first of all, can provide that type of comfort level? Because that's what I want out of mine, right? I don't want to have to be so concerned that when I submit something, particularly if it's in a regulated industry, I want to ensure that it works, right? And I want to be able to, because I'm gonna be responsible for it. I got to be able to determine how it came up with that answer, right? So I need to be able to open the black box. I need to be able to evaluate that algorithm. I need to be able to replicate what I saw. And I need to be there then justify that essentially the answer is correct. And that's been really a challenge. I mean, look, it's no secret in our industry, right? I think legacy applications that are building AI into their tools have a tougher time with it because of all the things that come along with the baggage of how they were built. Newer solutions, a little bit easier, right? Our architecture is more flexible. The interoperability components are easier. So I think those are things that obviously we look at first, and that I look at first, because I want that out of my systems. I think the next piece for me, I don't know if I coined this term or not, but I call it Burger King solutions, right? It's, remember in the old days, you guys might not be old enough to remember those commercials, have it your way at Burger King, if I want cheese on my burger or pickles or lettuce or onions, I want to be able to do it my way. And then I think it's the same with our AI solutions, in that I think a lot of providers are starting to figure this out, that initially just offering it in the cloud where you've got data issues and privacy issues and all those things wasn't good enough. So what's the next layer of that? Well, we can offer it in their cloud, in your own cloud, and maybe that makes people feel better. Or, how about being able to go back to something we never used to say for a long time, on-prem? Can we keep it inside our walls and inside our fence where we control all that data? And the answer is absolutely, those things are all doable. And so I think that it all comes back to that trust component is established by transparency, Chad. If you can be confident that what you're putting out from an output perspective can be justified, explained, and replicated, then I think we've got something. And I think that's happening. I think we're seeing that in a lot of systems today. I'm sure Ross and Jessica would be able to share the same.
I think that's right. I think one quick leap I saw was, and we saw this in the hallucination piece that you all were talking about, is the citation piece and the moving to like a verified source. Is like, there are very quick ways that I think, because the industry is so agile and so fast and there's so much technology, that it can gather feedback and iterate very quickly. And so this is something that I really want to do out of this panel. Like, we started covering some of the what's, and I love a what out of a conference. What I like even more is some of the hows. And so when we've talked about some of the challenges and how we think we are going to build more trust, Jessica, you're seeing and supporting thousands of lawyers all of the time use the technology, become educated about the technology. What is the thing that in your mind as a trend you are seeing that people are not paying attention to or not worrying about the most, that you think that people should get up the curve faster on, so that they can spot the right tech for them and feel confident that they can trust it and use it?
Yeah. All right. So this might surprise folks, this answer, but I have two words for you: data leakage. So one of the things that keeps me up at night, as I work at an innovative tech company and we're using all of the fantastic tools. An example is DocuSign just rolled out Glean throughout the organization. What is Glean, folks? It is a tool that is embedded in all of your data sources in your company, and you can query it for search and to create content. All the data sources, email, Google Drives, etc. Sounds great in theory, but remember, data leakage. So why does that keep me up from an ethical obligation, Chad? I think about, oh no, what does that mean about our obligations as an attorney in terms of maintaining sufficient client confidentiality of the information? Because when you implement tools like Glean or other legal tech tools, that is a very big risk of, unless you had super tight data hygiene about, hey, I'm going to save this file that has confidential information only to this location that is accessible and locked down to your legal department, huge risk. And folks, very low probability that was actually implemented. And then I also think about the other ethical obligation, Chad, of privilege. Like, we as attorney have an ethical obligation to try to maintain privilege of the advice that we've given. And if we somehow are negligent in how we lock down our data and allow those AI tools to just pull that, and maybe someone inadvertently from the business access it or use that data to train on it, then we are potentially in violation of our obligations there in terms of maintaining privilege.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because we used to think a lot about just seeing that from like an NDA perspective, and I always used to think about the NDAs about if the horse is out of the barn, good luck chasing down the horse. You want to build a right barn with the right horse, and you want to understand how it works. That's like kind of the green piece that you're talking about, which is like, and what John was saying too about understanding what you're building, feel good about it, because if you're relying upon chasing down a horse, I'm not that fast. It's not going to happen. And so when I think about kind of this responsibility, but also boosting the bottom line, and I saw in the chat already, one of our friends from Amsterdam was saying how much productivity and efficiency that they've gotten out of implementing legal tech. So I got to bring it to our European flavor with Ross. You know, Ross, you moved very quickly into building smart technology. How do you see it boosting the bottom line while still being responsible? Like, what is the part that actually stresses you out? You're a builder, you're a creator, you're a vendor to many companies. When you're building it in real time, you know you're making it more efficient. But what is the part in your mind that you're most worried about to say, this has got to be real tight, not just to make money, but so that people trust Wordsmith and believe Ross when he talks to them about what the product can do?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. So I think that there are a couple of elements to it. So the first is that buying this tech at the moment, there's such a huge amount of enthusiasm. People are just charging around and they're just procuring. And there's a huge amount of buying that often, you know, it doesn't really translate into much beyond very superficial adoption. You know, it becomes like that people just use it in a way that is basically like ChatGPT. And so there are two things that sort of worry me. So one is getting proper enablement and teaching and making sure that the clients you do work with actually end up getting and scaling it to a real rollout, so that you're not getting something that people are just going to buy and roll off. And then you're actually in an industry like ours, reputation and word of mouth is both a massive opportunity, but also a huge threat if you don't do that. And I think that you're a provider right now that goes out and you take things out and you just run through the market too fast. You're going to end up causing yourself a huge problem in 12, 18 months' time when that equation flips. The other thing that kind of worries me is on the flip side of not really adopting properly as a business. I think that we're going to see a lot more of shadow legal. So one of the previous companies I worked at was like a corporate travel agent, like a digital one. And we had a real conundrum there where a lot of people would book their own travel outside of the corporate program. They would go on the consumer sites, etc. And so to your point, Jessica, we have a lot of these products and tools that are the sort of the horizontals, the chat GPTs, etc. And the rest of the business is actually going out and is starting to enable themselves and use these things without guardrails and without supervision. That's a huge threat because they're not legal tools. There's no audit, there's no control. Many of them don't have privilege. They don't have. You're creating big audit trails of all sorts of stuff that can come out in discovery. You're getting advice that's totally in the wild. You're getting things that could be totally unvetted from a data privacy perspective. And you've got people that are getting used to relying on them for critical legal decisions, which is just opening up a huge risk aperture inside businesses. So I think balancing those two things is quite difficult. You sort of, you know, if you don't go in and start to enable the business, you're actually opening up a big problem. But in doing it, you have to do it in a way that you're actually going to make sure that you get a result that drives the bottom line. And I think the counterbalance between those two is quite important for teams.
Well, something I really love about that, and you know, like I was saying too earlier, that I implemented a CLM. I really enjoyed it. Never mind for the efficiency of getting out of the drudgery of my own work, but I love the efficiency it drove on the business side because it helped me as a legal function feel like a business function. I was operating like they were. And so instead of telling them I wanted to be a trusted advisor, you're just doing the thing. It's a lot faster to be considered something if you just do it. And so that's what I love about the most positive side of the technology is it turns legal into this different function, into a much more, you know, complementary function because you're operating in the way business does. And
Exactly.
John, I know that, you know, for you, you're a huge proponent, you're a huge advocate. You have been in many industries for the efficiency of technology. But Ross was talking a lot about the vetting. And Jess was too about like once you roll the product out and you integrate it. One part you said that I love, and I think about this in personal communication all the time, is like it's really intuitive to us as the recipient of communication what feels right. As a sender, we forget. I'm a parent, It's real easy to know that when my partner is being real calm and curious with me, that feels right, doesn't need to solve it for me, then I can turn around as a partner or a parent and try to deliver and force an outcome, right? So as the recipient, it's more obvious. So putting your recipient hat on, because you're an investor and a seller of AI and legal tech every day, what is your number one tip for all of the legal teams out here that are listening to this and thinking, how do I buy? How do I vet? What is your number one tip for them as a recipient yourself about how they choose a technology that's going to help them, but not create the level of stress that eliminates all the value that they were procuring in the first place? What's your tip for them?
This is one where, just like Jessica said, I've read over this question a few times, and I've changed my answer multiple times before I've even got here, because it is so challenging. Again, and to your point, Jed, look, I've consumed and I've sold, and I think it is more challenging today than it ever has been, and I'll tell you why. Because people are starting to think about kind of that contractual firewall there, right? I mean, so there's part of it where we're evaluating the technology and it spits and bites, it either works or it doesn't. Those things are starting to line up a little bit easier. But what's not lining up is, okay, so what happens inside those models, inside those LLMs where they're using my data and I don't know what they're doing with it, and I have no idea if they're training on it. We've all seen these. We're getting this from our software vendors all the time now. So trying to determine certain things like use restrictions and, again, transparency, but more explainability in terms of how do we contract to align with that particular software product. Very, very important to get these things right now with AI solutions, way more than it used to be, because I think there's way more confusion. And Jessica said it, data leakage. There's data usage and ownership issues that didn't exist before because of the way these LLMs work. And so that's challenging. There's security and then incident response challenges that didn't exist because of the way this technology works, right? There's communication and all sorts of legal compliance things that are going on inside there. So a couple of things I'll tell you, and I really didn't actually expect to throw this to Jessica, but we are actually working jointly on a project that we just completed, in fact, on one of these. Exactly. And this is the whole point. The whole point is to help vendors and people that are purchasing from them ensure that this handshake can be done effectively. Because look, the people that are selling the software, Chad, they don't really understand exactly what the expectation is on the other side either, because we're starting to define a lot of these roles. And so, one of the things that we've done is come to the table, right? I mean, again, Jessica and I at DocuSign, and we're working on a partnership right now that says, part of the best practice commitment to ensure that these things flange up right between the buyer and the seller is ongoing responsible AI terms and contracting, not just on the software, but getting the contracts to be reflective of exactly how that software works. And so this is live right now going on. Like I said, we released one of these products together last week, and we're out there trying to help the industry find ways to be able to do this better, because this is a challenge. Jessica, when you say this is an enormous challenge in the space right now, because there is a massive amount of confusion.
Concur on confusion. So the hint for folks on like what John is referring to is we're trying to create more standardization. And what I like to say is a lot of us contract nerds, fun fact, I'm the new head of contract nerds, is we all get annoyed when we negotiate contracts and see the comment, I'm redlining this, Chad, back to the redlining comment, because to align with industry standards. And what John and I are referring to is really defining what that standard means and minimizing that confusion.
I remember, this is how powerful this is about removing the confusion and operating more like a business. I remember one of the best, so I was a GC of a sell-side SaaS vertically integrated tech company, but partnering just like you two did. And I remember one of the best partner contracts I ever got had a 2-page, business style, glossy, plain words, pictures, emojis cover. And it had the caveat saying this isn't part of the contract, but it was like, this is what it means. This is what it does. And it just explained it as if your account manager or your account executive was at the table, but the lawyer had helped draft it, but it still felt, and I was reading it and I thought, okay, I fully understand what it does, what it doesn't do. what the risk profile it is. It's setting it out on the front end. Do I want the benefit of the product? So then when I went to the terms, I wasn't operating out of just some email or Slack message I got from the head of partnerships saying, hey, we want this thing. I fully understood from their perspective what it's meant to do and meant to achieve. And I think I even told them at that time, I was like, that's real smart. I think I might want to steal that idea. But you're building like the trust and you're acting like a business person. I'm always trying to tell lawyers, when I was doing lawyer coaching, is don't wait to be told you're trusted. Just do the thing first, and then they will call you that. And, I'm really curious between the two of you, we'll go a little off script for a second, is, Jess as the buyer, John as the seller, with revealing only what you can reveal though, curious about how you got over a sticking point of bringing this partnership together. Like different products, different integration, there's various commercial pieces, different relationships, different places in the market. What was something that was hard and you found a way through?
Jessica, I'd say the need. I would say this is such an important so I think the reason you chose this as a question, Chad, is because this is such an important piece in the industry right now that we're all struggling with. But we all so desperately want to solve it. And so my answer to that is the need was so much more important and powerful and necessary than any hurdle we would face to be able to figure out how we're going to solve it. And, to Jessica's credit, look, DocuSign jumps in and says, we're going to be part of this. We're going to drive this home. We're a trust brand. This has to happen. It has to happen.
Yeah. So, candidly, DocuSign is not a small company, Chad. It is a publicly traded 7,000 person and plus employee company, $15 billion market cap. So in terms of the challenge, Chad, it is me getting and collecting internal stakeholder buy-in at any large company and influence those stakeholders and not just saying, agree to this. It is collaborating and be like, hey, this is an idea that I think is a great idea, partnering with the project with John. This is what I see as the upsides. What do you are there downsides? I mean, you tell me. So they're a part of the process. So and this applies to any sort of negotiations, Chad, is being able to collaborate, have a conversation like that deal you talked about, Chad, where they gave you that cover letter with that business brief, really, and help you educate on the risk profile. Brilliant, by the way. And they included you, the opposing side made you a part of the business process, because the reality is your internal business client who gave you that contract didn't give you that context.
Yeah.
And so, yes, and that's a very common thing. They're working a gazillion things. They just forward it to legal review this and approve it. So brilliant that they made you a part of the process. So a muscle for anybody listening is that's how you get over those hurdles, is bring people in.
There's two things I love there. One is, and I feel this all the time, is I love the innovation of technology because it also means the human part becomes more important. Technology continues to get better, which means the bar on quality of tech use and tech product gets higher. It means the human part's really important. And I think John and Jess, you talked about that in the partnership that you guys have created. And, Ross, I think about what you're building. Didn't start yesterday. You've been building this product for years, but you're gaining a lot of traction right now. But also, as like a fairly newer market entrant, not as big as DocuSign, but bringing this very innovative product across both sides of the ocean. Curious for you, what is the hardest question you've had to answer when you've been trying to storytell and people saying, either not sure I get it, not sure I trust you? What's the hardest thing that you've had to answer and how did you do it?
I'd say the hardest question that we have to answer is how you differentiate. And I think what happens in the market right now is that there are so many products and there's so much noise and there's so much VC money being thrown around that every single GC, every legal team is just being hammered from all directions. Everybody's screaming at them. And in many cases, they're kind of just closing down a bit. It's like they know that they need to do something, but it's overwhelming, the number of vendors and the number of sort of inbound signals that they get. So trying to find a way to do that empathetically has been, was a challenge. And our approach has been to just become a lot more personal in how we work. So when everybody else goes to huge scale and they just try and create inordinate amounts of noise everywhere, we go the other direction. and we become a lot sharper, and we do a lot more events. We do a lot more sort of interaction with our customers. We focus much more on the non-scalable bits, the enablement and the speaking and the applying account management or legal engineers on top of it. And we've actually, I didn't expect it to become this way. Actually, we've sort of ended up shifting so that it's not just the technology that we now deliver. We spend a lot more time adding our own human elements around that, so that we build a lot more of a relationship with our clients. And I think, that was a big shift for us. The other element was how you then differentiate on a sort of a positioning and a messaging perspective, because everybody just screams, I'm a contracting tool, I'm a co-pilot tool, or I'm for law firms, or I'm just for lawyers. And so it took us a while actually to work out how to communicate our identity, which in our side is that we think there's a new category of legal enablement. And we position very much as the translation layer between the legal team and the business. And while we have a lot of the co-pilots of contracting and these other elements, we are very, very much in that spot of a more specialized version of Glean or these other elements that sit right between your business units and your consumers, which is actually where we think the ROI is for legal in the in-house perspective. And it's a problem that you don't have to deal with if you're solving for law firms. So positioning was a big challenge for us in a noisy market, and then actually changing our service to be better suited to a noisy market are two big things that I think once we cracked those, you literally can see the numbers internally. Everything was 10x more impactful. So yeah, it's been a good lesson in how to deal with a choppy market.
And Ross, was that simply from gathering feedback of the prospect and client conversations you were having? Was it gathering data through the product use case? Was it seeing how your brand was being thought of in the market? Like, for folks that are maybe out there right now trying to think about, I'd really love to work at a legal tech AI company, or I'd love to bring my legal skills into this industry. Like, how do you gather the data points to make your company better, faster?
Yeah. So there were two things that we did. We stopped trying to sell to everyone. We immediately cut down our universe to just in-house teams, which actually at the time that we started was really controversial, because a lot of the big contracts are being signed with law firms, because by nature they just have much bigger. So one, we cut our universe of people that we cared about deeply to be a much smaller market, although it's actually still massive. And then two, we ignored the data from that was anything other than directly communicating with people. So we then tried to get much more personal, and we stopped trying to look at it through dashboards and reports and anything of that nature. And we just had a lot of conversations and sort of built up a much more human heuristic. So I guess the irony that I've found is that moving into AI has actually been a much more human-centric exercise and a much less technology-centric exercise than I'm typically used to, which also makes sense, right? That's how we as lawyers like to do business. We're used to interacting. And I think as long as you are, I think the biggest insight for me in all of this, as long as there are two humans on either side of an interaction, it doesn't matter what the tools are.
Yeah,
it's gonna.
I like that community education building. I feel like with lawyers, we were trained with find the problem. You find a problem, you get a pat on the head. That's what law school from the very beginning taught us. And so it is very difficult actually to sell to lawyers, because lawyers are always looking for problems, real smart, can find problems real fast. And if they find one problem, then they're going to extrapolate lots of problems. And so I really like the community education of us all sharing what we're building, what we're learning, how we're doing it, and why we care. And I love the why we care part, because that's a differentiator to me. People used to ask me about like posting on LinkedIn, like, oh yeah, do you really mean all this stuff? And I was like, you try to post this much about these things for years if you don't care, and see if you can do it. You get exhausted. And when I think about storytelling, education, building trust, John, you've done this in a way that, almost no one has on LinkedIn. And also you've made yourself more vulnerable to kind of give permission to the industry to be more vulnerable too. And so as you've been building the personal brand, the brand for your companies, and now someone who is trying to encourage our industry to adopt AI, what are you bringing in from other industries you supported before that you can say, listen, that was a hard road in the biotech space, but we managed to get there? What are you bringing over that you think all the lawyers watching today can think about and take comfort from to say, John's done this before in other industries. That industry struggled. managed to get there through this level of education or human connection or story process or just seeing the product work? Like, what are you saying to lawyers today that are cynical to say, don't worry, we've got you. It's not going to go off the guardrails. And how do you get folks to be comfortable with it?
Yeah, it's a great question and actually a great topic, Chad, because I think it is absolutely true that, look, I don't think legal is as far behind as maybe the perception is, but the fact is there are other industries that are out there a little bit ahead, and we've been able to service them. And so, what have we done to be able to bring confidence in these solutions that we ultimately build? Well, a couple of things. First of all, the guardrails you mentioned. I mean, so, what are we looking at? We're looking at layers. We're looking at data layers of those guardrails, right? We've got to make sure that we're pre-training and that data, I think Jessica said it, both leakage and hygiene, critical in terms of how we deal with it in AI. The model layer alignment, this goes back to something Ross said. I think it's intriguing in that a lot of what we're doing to shape the model's behavior in AI really reflects more how humans behave than machines behave. So we're figuring that out now. We're building guardrails in that are much more reflective of exactly what Ross just described. And I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought this is going to be a bits and bytes conversation. And in fact, it's not at all, right? It's trying to figure that out. And then the last piece of it, at least for us, is to make sure that the systems, again, back to confidence and clarity and transparency and all those things at the application and the runtime layer, to make sure that the input and the output filters are providing the appropriate information that people feel very quickly they can get to the answer quickly, they can justify it quickly. You've seen the same things I've seen in this industry, people putting out reports that end up in courts and we find out those cases didn't even exist. That kind of stuff, these guardrails should be able to catch every single bit of that. But at the end of the day, we still, this is an augmented tool to help attorneys and lawyers be better, right? This is not making the final decision. So part of that last guardrail is no different than it used to be, right? The expectation is, as lawyers, you have to be the final stop in this process. You are the final guardrail all the time. So we can put all those guardrails in place. We can make it better. We're going to, because we've done it in other industries and they're successful. Even in regulated industries, we will get there. We're moving faster than we've ever moved. I'm more excited. Again, I said this last year to you, and it's the same thing. If you're not excited about what's going on in this space right now, I don't know where you live. I don't know where you're paying attention, but you need to invite me over, because this is an amazing, amazing time to be able to take advantage of what's on the table right now. And the things that are bad about it, they're never going to get any worse. They're only going to get better. This technology is going to change the way we do things in a good way. We just have to embrace it more.
I love that. And there's as you're always the hype train, John. No one's leaving a conversation with John Lindsay not being excited. And in the chat, we can even see folks saying, like, an analogy to like golf clubs, where like, yeah, you can buy the latest and greatest technology on golf clubs and like probably a great idea, but if you never practice and if you don't get coaching, you don't just get to buy the ball off the commercial, get the new clubs, roll up, and then just knock it 350 yards. It's not going to happen. And so I think Ross and John, and I'm curious, Jess, for your take on this, is that you're both talking actually a lot about humans. And so we think about, where do we draw the line? You're talking a lot about this kind of like bottom half of the work that's painful, could be done faster, but you are talking about the guardrail layers of like the humans have to be inserted here. Because if we get too far, where Jess was talking about the Glean example, the information starts leaking everywhere. It's going to be too hard to catch. The design and implementation and success isn't going to be as tight. Jessica, I'm curious for you, what has been the most captivating talk track that you've heard either from like the AEs that you work with or as a buyer of technology, maybe partnering with John? What is the most captivating thing to you that says, I can trust the line of who owns what? The technology can move this far, but I trust that the humans are in there. How are you sharing that at DocuSign to folks that are saying, Jess, are there enough humans in the mix? Like, how do you decide where to draw the line at DocuSign from the bots stopping and the humans making sure that we have the right guardrails in place?
Ooh. I think, well, I actually wasn't really ready for that, but I'll answer from not just an AI perspective, Chad, but just any kind of software or tech. The answer, I think, is not over-promising and under-delivering, and really right-sizing expectations. I think the challenge for a lot of these AI companies now and a lot of lawyers who are doing this work is expectations are way too big about what AI can do. And so the most compelling talk track is the authenticity. I think a lot of lawyers have a strong BS radar. And so they don't want to be BS, and then you lose trust. So they lose trust if in the sales process, expectations are set way too high. And then they get in the tool. Oh, Ross is nodding his head. They get in the tool and they be like, wait a minute, it didn't do what I thought it would do. I'll never use this again. And they don't, and you lose trust, and re-earning that trust is really difficult. And then they abandon the tool. And you know what? There's a gazillion other legal tech tools that all seemingly seem to do the same thing to an outsider. I'm sure, Ross, you know what your moat is, your differentiators are. But to the average lawyer out there, we don't know. We don't know. So I think it's trust, Chad.
Yeah.
It is who can execute and communicate that trust most effectively and then deliver on that expectations is where I've seen it.
Sometimes maybe it's the version of the 2-page document on the front of the contract that just like the trust doesn't have to be, built, a million miles deep. It can be thinking about the human element of being the recipient of things you trust. And I think that's been a big trend line here about storytelling, community building, being the recipient of trust and understanding what it feels like when you trust someone, and then parlaying that to when you're trying to help others scale their business, knowing when to say, my product might not be the right fit for you. That's something we think a lot about at Goodlawyer, because there is no sense once you get to a certain size of business to be forcing things that are a bad fit. Ross talked about this a bit too. You waste time, you waste energy, you lose trust, and then folks are not waving your flag anywhere. They're actually talking about you in a way that you don't want when you're not in the room.
I'll tell you a funny story on that. I couldn't agree more. I was at a conference a little while ago, and I watched one of our AEs turn around and tell someone, we're not the right tool. 20 minutes later, there were 3 references from that person who then was walking around referring people who they thought were a better fit. And it comes entirely back to that point that what you're saying, Jessica, I could not agree more with. It's like the backbone of what's kind of going a bit wrong in legal AI right now. And I think if you can crack that, everything opens up.
I love that. I remember as a buyer when I remember an opening line from like some Bay Area, probably 23-year-old AE said to me at the front end, he said something like, if I don't think after this discovery that we're the right product for you, I will tell you, and I will point you in the direction of someone who's a better fit. That blew my mind, and I've always remembered that, because as a recipient, you're thinking to yourself, now I'm real curious, because it's not make or break, you're going to jam this down my throat. So I just love that we really showed about how the technology can increase the pace, increase the velocity and the outcome, but how important humans are to storytelling, implementation, vetting, design, and building a community of people who want this stuff. I want to ask one lightning round question. We didn't plan for this, and I'll give you each one sentence to answer it. What is the most unpopular opinion you hold about AI and legal tech for our industry? What's a hot take that you would have that you don't think many people would share?
Who's going first?
Unpopular opinion. Okay, I will fall on the sword, fellas. All right, so an unpopular opinion. Most legal tech companies are neglecting adoption.
Okay.
Ross.
Sorry, Ross, I don't know of your adoption numbers, but I'm talking about the universe of legal tech companies as a whole.
I think an unpopular opinion is that growing fast isn't necessarily a good thing at the moment.
Good one.
Fair. John.
Yeah, and I would say, one of the things I hear that I think is just a complete myth is that legal's behind and they're never going to take advantage of all this. It's going to stay that way and it won't change. I'm seeing massive adoption out there and look, they might not have it figured out yet. The case studies still have to be, and the use cases have to be figured, but I think there's an appetite for it out there. We're all human beings. We see it, we're using it in our lives. Legal's going to be just fine, and they're going to leverage the heck out of this, and it's not going to make people go away. It's going to help them do their jobs better. It's going to be, look, we're going to come back next year, Chad, and we're going to be talking about all the advancements we made. We're going to be excited, right? We might have lost a little bit of hair, but there's no question we're going to watch success stories unfold.
Great hair, John.
You got good hair. You got good hair.
It's very silky. Listen, friends, I hope that we do all come back next year because I knew this was going to be an amazing conversation. I want to give a big thanks to Jessica, Ross, John for the thoughtfulness, the being willing to go off the script, sharing the hot takes that you didn't know I was going to ask you about, and for letting us know where the industry is going, what the tech is building, but how important the humans remain. I think it's going to give everybody a lot of confidence that it's something that we can positively lean into instead of being worried about. So thank you all so much.
Well
Now
done, good lawyer.
Yeah, well done.
Appreciate you.
Well
Appreciate
done.
y'all. Okay,
Sure.
thanks all. We're going to move to another massive legal tech company brand that you know that's been investing in tech and AI to help everyone get out ahead and get away from the drudgery. Thanks to Thomson Reuters for sharing a quick look on how their product is helping legal teams harness the power of AI responsibly and effectively. Let's roll that tape.
So awesome. Thank you so much, Thomson Reuters. We love very much that you're helping make the admin elements of our lawyer lives so much faster and less painful. I don't know anybody who couldn't use more of that. Now we're shifting from artificial intelligence to something deeply, deeply human. This next conversation is one I've been very, very excited for. We're calling it Resilience is Not the Goal. Now, we've all heard the mantra, just be resilient. Oh, and here are all these different tools and things that you can do to become more resilient. But what if that's not actually the answer and it's just a coping mechanism for systems that really need to change? Today, I'm joined by Lina Yousefi, founder of Why Law and The Split, award-winning family and employment lawyer, and a fierce advocate for redefining leadership and wellness in law. I first had the pleasure of meeting Lina a couple of years ago, and within the first 30 seconds of hearing her speak, I was immediately struck by her let's do this attitude. Others say it's impossible, there's not a way, that'll take a long time. Lina says, why not? Watch me. She's built Canada's largest female-led law firm by doing things differently and by refusing to accept burnout as a badge of honor. It's not about bouncing back. It's about building something better. Let's do this. Hi, Lina. Welcome.
Good.
It's so good to see you.
So good to see you as well, Pauline. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Okay, well, let's just jump into it, Lina. So, okay, you have always been very open and honest about the unsustainable culture of overwork in law. How do you differentiate between grit on one hand and what's actually toxic endurance on the other?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this a lot lately, and I think in the simplest terms, like imagine a pro athlete, right? Like they are supposed to be performing at the absolute best that they can, right? So resilience is the goal for this individual, and it's good resilience, it's healthy resilience, and they're expected to train, sometimes all day, every day, and they're supposed to prioritize and all that. And there's obviously value in that, and we need that person. But if you look at that person, what kind of support do they get to where they are, right? So their food is designed by experts. They are told that they have to put pencil down or whatever, the ball down, and sleep, a certain set of hours every day. They're taught that they need to go and get fresh air, for example, and so the support around them is massive, so that when the time comes during those few hours of training, they're well rested, they're in usually a good headspace. A lot of times they have counseling, they have friends, they have support groups. And so when the time comes to be resilient, and by that I mean good resilience should be the goal, but the resilience is being supported by this ecosystem of healthy individuals who are experts at what they do to bring this person to where they are, right? So then you look at your lawyer, right? Like the way that the legal profession has gone, right? Where is the support, right? Like if you want me to come out of law school and be the absolute best lawyer I need to be, there's a few basic things that I need. One is I need rest, right? Like every other human. Two, I need good food, like every other human. Three, I need good coping mechanisms, right? So for the athlete, the coping mechanism might be to go and do kickboxing and release the energy, versus for the lawyer who's already really tired, the coping mechanism might be to have a drink or drugs or whatever it is to make them cope, right? So resilience, to me, on its own is a fantastic thing, but there's healthy resilience and there's toxic resilience, and I feel like in the legal profession what we need to do is we need to cultivate the healthy resilience versus the toxic resilience. There you go.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. The way I've been thinking about it is like a common saying, and what I use often is like, when you get a lemon, you want to make lemonade out of it, right?
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. And to me, that feels a lot like resilience. But when we're talking about these lemons are just cascading down on you like a mountain of lemons, and they just keep showing up no matter what happens, you're like, I don't want any more lemonade. That's enough. It's killing me. I don't need any more. The problem has nothing to do with, can I make lemonade? It's actually, what is sending all of these lemons my way? Like, what is happening? We need to stop the lemons. They can come one at a time, not in a mountain, And I 100%, I couldn't agree more with you. I have thoughts on what I've heard you speak about before, but I want to ask you, so what structural or cultural change do you think would have the biggest immediate impact in reducing burnout across the legal industry?
I think the biggest one is just like acknowledging and recognizing that it's not a one size fit all for, like every different kind of lawyer, right? Like I'm an employer, right? So like a part of me wants to maximize, profitability. I understand when, I can understand why, as law firms or businesses get bigger, things become more about numbers, all of that, right? And of course I have an interest myself in making sure that my people work as hard as they can, right? But on the other hand, and I also acknowledge that being a lawyer and being in law, is a privilege, and there's a standard that has to be upheld, right? So you don't want to make people lazy, right? Like there's a balance between making sure that you produce good lawyers and not lazy lawyers, and not burnout lawyers, right? Burnt out lawyers. So what worked for us, a couple of things that I can remember, is we do hold different people to different standards. So senior lawyers have already paid their dues. They've climbed the ladders. There's no reason for us to work them to the bones. What are we trying to achieve out of that? If it's just money, then forget it, right? Like, so if a senior lawyer comes to us and says, hey, I want to have a different target, and I want to have this kind of autonomy, we provide that flexibility. Versus when an articling student comes in and says, I want to start by working 4 days a week, right? Because we are known for providing 4 days a week. Then I ask why, right? And if they say, because I have a dog, or I have a husband, or I have a child, or whatever, that's fine and well. But if you're starting your career in law by not prioritizing your career, then we're not the right entity for you. So they will be held to a higher standard at the beginning of their career, which might be higher targets, or working a little bit longer than the senior lawyer. So it's all about flexibility. The second thing is, there's a big tension, and like most lawyers, in the prime of their careers, they also happen to be parents. They also happen to be spouses, right? So in exchange for getting them to work really hard and demand them, for example, to come back to the office, 5 days a week, we might get a little bit more productivity from them, or they might perform better at work. But it will come at the cost of them constantly feeling like they're guilty and they're not good enough parents and they're not there for their family, right? That cost to me is higher than, for example, allowing them to work remotely, right? Because again, we're talking about toxic resilience and healthy resilience, right? Toxic resilience is when you say, yeah, I did it and I performed well, but it came at the cost of PTSD, anxiety, depression, like long-term unsustainable mental health issues, which after a couple of years are going to drive me out of the profession, right? So I'm not saying that hybrid work, for example, is a better system than back to office, which is what we're seeing a lot of firms are doing. Maybe back to the office works really well for the long firm owner, but if you're looking at long-term sustainability of your people who are trying to juggle all these walls, providing some work flexibility like that is the least you can do, because a lot of times you're still getting the same amount of billables and productivity. Maybe you're not seeing them all day, every day, but that's a small price to pay in exchange for them feeling like they're there for their family and therefore they like their work environment more. So it doesn't have to be something extreme like, like we're going to do 4-day work weeks like we did, but it can be little things. Little things go a really long way in my mind anyway.
Yeah. I think about, and it's absolutely what you said, like it's different things for different people at different times in your career. And certainly in I think the early days, we all remember what it's like to be an articling student and a junior lawyer. It's a lot of uncertainty, confusion, it's quite a bit of a struggle. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being told, hey, here's some different tools that you can use to become more resilient, because it is a stressful, high pressure job. But at the same time, again, when you're doing that constantly, and then when you get into the part of your life, as you said, where you've got other commitments, you have children who need you, you're guiding the future of our society. Like, this is super important. And you also, at the same time, potentially have aging parents who need help. And just, you are it. You are the one who needs to help them. That little bit of autonomy and flexibility is going to go such a long way in helping build an environment where it's easy to be resilient, right? You don't have to be stressed out that like, oh my God, I didn't go to the office today, and now when am I going to get fired, basically. I think you're absolutely right. It's different for different parts of your career, but I think the important thing again is that if you're feeling that pull between I'm never there for my family because I'm at the office all the time, 100%, well, I guess not 100%, but almost all the time, the family is going to win out. And then very sadly, if it is not the family that wins out, then we see what we always see in the profession, which is just higher levels of burnout, depression, suicide, anxiety, and divorce. And like that's a broken system. That is not something that I think we should have to, I have to exercise more, I have to eat more healthy. That's not going to fix it. That's not enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, you're very open also about redefining what success means in your life. How would you say that definition, kind of like what we were just talking about, how would you say that definition has changed and evolved over time? And was there any sort of specific moment or life event that triggered this big mindset shift for you?
I want to tell you like a personal story, because this actually happened quite recently, and it's kind of like magical. I don't think my definition of success has changed. I am your type A, ADHD, nothing is ever enough. I seek validation from the external world and I'm not shy about it. I'm trying to be more spiritual and internal, but no, I like the spotlight, right? So, and I work really hard. I was born into war, right? So like I was born into an environment where it was fight or flight from the time I was born, right? Like, so I left through war, I left through abuse, lived through abuse, I lived through sexual assault, I left through immigration at the age of 13. When you're becoming a teenager, all of a sudden, no, your friends are gone and, there's a new environment and nobody wants to be your friend. Like that was sometimes even more traumatic than getting sexually assaulted. Honestly, like these things, unless you go through them, you'll never know, right? So then I was kicked out of university and then I got into law school. So my entire life has been this resilience and grit, right? So I was used to you need to suffer and you need to go through pain and trauma to get to where you're going to get, right? And then as of last year, my body began reacting in ways that I had never seen before, and I wasn't sure, what's going on. So I was having insomnia, I was having this digestive issues. I had to sleep throughout the day just to function for a couple hours. Like my body was giving up. So I started going through this journey of what the heck is going on, right? So I started being like, okay, I'm overworked, right? So I took a 2-month sabbatical, and I went through all these different therapies and whatnot, and that wasn't the case. Then I was like, is it my marriage? It wasn't the case. Is it the postpartum birth, right? Is it my body going through its own anxiety? No. And then all of a sudden, I sat in front of somebody and they were like, look, if you want to like a Ferrari, you need the oil and the engine of a Ferrari. You don't have that. How are you going to get that, right? So, and they're like, you can still like a Ferrari by giving yourself good engine instead of exhausting yourself, right? So I started actually giving my body what it wanted, right? And for me, that was intensive exercising, really good healthy eating, working extremely focused during the work hours, and leaving work at 5, right? And it was the hardest thing to do because 5 years ago, if I had to take 1 hour to go and do yoga, I called myself a failure. I said that I'm not working hard enough and I'm a sham, and look at my lawyers, are working harder than I am. I'm just 5 years ago, it was like out of question, right? I started being kinder to my body, right? And I started exercising. What happened though was unbelievable, because instead of having less success because I was putting in less hours into my life, I was having exponentially more success because the quality of my work and my focus was paying back tenfold. And at the same time, my body was flying and thriving. Like I was in a better shape than I've been all my life. And I went through challenges which would have honestly, like in normal circumstances, would have given me some health issues. Like the challenges that I went through in the last few months, I haven't gone through all my life. But because of that daily, like intensive release of this energy out of my body, which for me came out of like kickboxing, intensive exercising, for different people it's different things, my body, as it was coming, it was releasing. And when I was showing up to work, I had this clear mind and this focus on my work. So all my targets were met, even though I was putting in less hours in. My kids are happier. My marriage is doing better. My marriage was getting to critical points because of how my body had become, right? So in any event, this is a very long story, but I'm saying this from a personal point of view, because I don't want it to come out as me, preaching to others that, here's your ideal fairy tale of a situation of a lawyer who's, like happy working, less exercising and feeling happy. And the people are going to say, well, there's the reality of, these are my targets. This is what they're expecting. I'm actually saying you can do it. You can have it both. You can have it both and still perform the way that your employer is expecting you to perform. It's just a matter of changing your habits, changing your toxic resilience for your healthy resilience, and imagining the Ferrari and the pro athlete while you do that, because you can get there and you can be the pro lawyer by doing that.
Oh, Lena, thank you so much for sharing that. It's not shocking. This happens when you and I get together. I start to cry and you start to cry, and this is just our thing, I guess. We've got comments from the audience who are saying thank you so much for sharing that and being so vulnerable, and it really resonates so much. I unfortunately, I have also been a victim of sexual assault, and it is just, it's really hard to then tell yourself that you need to take time away from the work that you're doing for your employer so that you can go to therapy. When you're like, I'm gonna be gone for 2 hours, and it's like, no. Especially the way that we are built, I think, we are just like, okay, no, I'm gonna push that aside into the corner, and we're just gonna go out there, put on the face, and do the things that we know we can do. But unfortunately, it very much feels like if you don't listen to your body, you don't look for those things that are telling you this is toxic endurance, it is not healthy resilience, your body will tell you, and your emotions will find one way or another way out of you, and it may not come out the way that you hoped, and it's probably going to come out in a time and a place that is just absolutely horrifying to you. And so it is always, I mean, it's so hard, so easy to say it from the other side of it, but it is just so hard to take that moment to step back and say, you know what, this is not okay. This is toxic resilience, toxic endurance, and I need to go find some help. I need to figure out what it is that I need to help build forward for a healthy resilience instead. Oh, thank you so much, Lena. So, I think many of us, we feel trapped by expectations as well. And I think that really plays into what we're willing to be open and honest about, whether it's our clients or our firms, or even just these little blocks that we build on the inside of us. What is your practical advice? What is your experience? What would you share with people who knows they are burnt out, but they're afraid to make a change?
I love that you asked that because again, as an employer, I'm gonna put the employer hat on, and I can probably say this on behalf of many employers. The problem with us, and especially women and sometimes men as well, is that our no's are negotiable. This is the problem with us. Our no's are not non-negotiable, right? So I was, speaking to my friend, it was like, like especially with women, you even, like consent to, like kissing somebody or having sex with somebody, it's kind of like a dance. Like you have to say no and they have to come to you. And then, as they persist, then you say, yeah, and it's a cute thing to do. That kind of societal conditioning that some people's no's are negotiable is what has got us here, right? So like if your employer came to you and they said that I expect you to work till midnight, and you initially said, no, I really need to rest, but you ended up doing it anyway, how can you blame them for expecting you to continue doing that, right? So the boundary setting is something that a lot of the lawyers really lack because they're either afraid or they think they're gonna say yes this time, but next time I'm gonna say no, right? Like we ourselves are sending the wrong signals to our employers. And I'm saying this from an employer perspective. I've had juniors coming to me and saying, look, I have a trial, and this is in the code of professional conduct. You have a trial, you have to work around the clock. You can't say, I'm gonna go home at 4 p.m. That's not realistic. But I've had juniors come to me and say, look, I'm gonna be working all weekend and I have a trial. I'm going to be exhausted. When it's done, I need 3 days off. No problem, right? Or I have juniors saying, look, I can do this, but I need help. I need 2 legal assistants or I need another lawyer to finish this task. Is that okay? And I've had juniors coming, like me going to some juniors and saying, hey, can you do this? And they say no. And the more firm they are, the more I respect them. And I have difficulty thinking that every other employer would disrespect them or they would get blamed for it. I don't think a lot of the employers' intention is to punish you for setting your boundaries. I just think that there's a lot of mixed signals happening in the legal world, where somebody comes and just offers themselves to us in hopes of keeping a job. They say, I'm going to work till midnight. And we say, okay, well, I was actually speaking to a big law partner. She was saying, there's one junior lawyer that says, I'm going to work around the clock. There's the other one that says, I'm going to go home at 6 p.m. We will throw all of our work to the one that say, I'll work till midnight. But both people are getting the same pay. And both people are, as long as their work quality is good, they're probably going to be, like brought into the partnership around the same time, right? So she's saying, I as a human, I'm going to go to that person. Yes, it's wrong. But the responsibility of setting boundaries starts with us, not with the employer. And I think the more people do it, the more it becomes normalized. The problem is it's not becoming normalized because we're still assuming that an employer is going to punish us for not setting boundaries. And I don't buy it to the level that other people do.
Oh, it's so true. And it's not as if we're blaming people for anything, but it's true. The mixed signals, like every single time I say no to something, I know no is a complete sentence. I know that. I can say it. I can repeat it anytime anybody asks. But when I say no, immediately the first thing I say is, no, because da 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 da. And then I explain. And every time I've said this, and my husband or whoever, someone else is around, my husband typically is like, stop. Why are you explaining yourself? No, that's it. And every time I have to be like, oh yeah, right, I don't need to explain myself. And it's so funny because I'm also trying to teach my kids this at the same time that I'm trying to learn it for myself. No, if you say no, that's the end of the story. We don't need to explain anymore. And how can I tell them this, to do this, when I myself am still struggling to be like, no, because of blah, 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 blah. But it's like when I explain it to my kids, I remind myself, you better live as the example of this. You cannot teach them to say no and not explain themselves without doing the same thing. And so I'm finding that it's actually so helpful for me to remember, what would you tell your kids? And if you wouldn't allow your kids to explain beyond the no, then don't do it. Stop right there. It's really hard though. Like literally sometimes I feel like I'm like, don't let it out. Don't let it out.
I feel stressed out by not explaining or by not agreeing. Like I get anxious and it's very difficult, but there does need to be a shift. And it starts with us and our generation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like it's trying to escape, and I'm just like, Okay, so last 30 seconds here. So, okay, if there is one belief or behavior you wish every lawyer could unlearn by Monday, what would it be?
Oof. One behavior they would don't expect that your assistants work the same hours that you do. It's not nice. It's not nice. They have their own lives as well. You know, we were talking about our own work-life balance, and I just wish lawyers were. I know this is not a very inspirational answer, but it means something to the assistant that you guys just know that they also have lives, and we need to obviously include them in these conversations as well. My time is up, it seems. I have people here.
You know what? I completely agree with you. I actually feel like we should look to the assistants sometimes for them setting the boundaries. My mom was a legal assistant. She never set those boundaries. And now all I can think is, Mom, I'm going to try my best to set those boundaries for myself because you couldn't. Oh, Lena, we can't do this again. It's just me crying this whole time. Oh my God, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure you can see that, like, I've got all the hard eyes if you can see past the tissues and the tears. Oh, but we love you, Lena. I love you so much for reminding us that real leadership is not about pushing through. It's about protecting the people we lead. And honestly, it starts with ourselves. And I'm going to ask somebody to write that down for me later so that I remember this, okay? Thank you again,
so much,
Lena.
Paul. You're amazing.
All right, everybody. Now we're shifting gears to a different kind of leadership, the kind that happens in the boardroom. Chad, sending it over to you.
Wow, that's tough to follow, but I'm glad that it's tough to follow because we knew that would be a really difficult but also inspiring conversation because both of you give everyone else more permission to be who they are, to care for themselves, and to still be an amazing leader. So thank you, Pauline. Huge appreciation to you and Lena for going deep and saying the quiet parts out loud. Burnout, boundaries, rethinking what success looks like. It's all connected to this next conversation. Because if we want to be the leader that is there sustainably, consistently being the example, not just advisors, but as real decision makers and folks that are leading from the front, we got to start talking strategy in a way that the business understands. This next panel is called How Legal Wins in the C-Suite. The best GCs and CLOs, they aren't just legal experts. They're operators, they're strategists, and they shape organizational impact every day in real time. So we're going to explore how can legal go from being the risk department to the value engine? And I want to introduce our three amazing panelists now. Craig Siegel, CLO and Global Procurement Officer at Hootsuite. Craig's influence across legal, procurement, customer operations is immense. He knows how to turn complex challenges into business strategy that actually lands with people. He's also one of the driest, funniest humans you're ever going to meet. So sit beside him at a dinner if you're ever near Craig. Sherry Hozaki, former GC of Cadbury and former GC of HarperCollins Harlequin, now a fractional GC, building her own business. Sherry's worked across jurisdictions, transformative initiatives, and she's done it around the world. She's a masterclass in legal leadership, knows how to adapt and earn trust in the C-suite. I've seen it firsthand. And Anastasia Boyko, legal AI futurist, and a leading voice on how talent, data, and design thinking are transforming lawyers and our industry. She's a former Yale Law Leadership Dean, #goals, and Chief Innovation Officer at the University of Utah, S.J. Quinney College of Law. And she brings a future-forward lens that every exec should be thinking about and looking from their lawyers right now. So let's dive into this. Craig, let me go to you, because you hold legal leadership roles, but you also hold business leadership roles across procurement and customer assurance. It sounds great now, and you're the CLO of Hootsuite, a tech darling, but I don't imagine that it was so easy for you to never mind grow to own a legal team, but also own business teams. And so I want to go a little bit off the script straight away. And I want to find out, Craig, how did you make that leap? Did someone offer it to you? Did you put your hand up? And what was the hardest or scariest thing in owning a business team? Oh, I can't hear you, my friend.
All right, there we go. Great event and great to be here. I think the last panel there was some tears, so hopefully I won't cause a lot of tears. But I think when it comes to kind of the legal function, and as you kind of start to pivot, it's just not a natural progression. It's not, I always use the analogy or, kind of similar. CFO comes into a company and right away they are given, all different kinds of functions, whether they're actually competent or not. And legal really kind of needs to advocate for the breadth of what legal can do and to kind of maneuver. And, I think a lot of it really kind of starts with one believing in oneself, and then ultimately using the right language, and that's everything from, speaking business speak, kind of getting into, what are the business metrics, staying away from kind of the jargon, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say, jumping from just the pure legal function where, one is generally can be successful and that's what you're trained. And I would say kind of the scariest thing is just feeling that you're going to fail in the sense of, how are you going to pivot and, are you going to be able to adapt to actually being viewed as someone that is not looking at it from the pure legal lens, but looking at it from a, holistic business perspective. And that's scary because I think we all as lawyers, and I think we all got to get over this, is we pigeonhole ourselves. So the scariest thing is jumping out of that box and really kind of adapting to the environment and knowing that the skills are transferable. And it's important to remember that. But I think a lot of it is our own, self-perpetuating or, problem where we ultimately, pigeonhole ourselves and not really, result in broader thinking and know what we can actually bring to the table to the, the greater, call it organization or other departments that are not pure legal.
I think about this a lot when we have these sayings that we think are cute and funny in our industry, like can't do math, so I went to law school, or if I can't be a lawyer, what else could I do? And I think that we actually unintentionally embed that in our brains too early on. I wish law school degrees were just called critical thinking degrees or something. I feel like we would do so many other things. And Craig, to your point around just believing in ourselves, is that we wouldn't be afraid to believe in ourselves because we have a critical thinking degree and that could be deployed to anything. And maybe we get a specialty in law or something. I wish we would just change the name of it. But I want to go to Sherry now too, and thinking about this shift. I mean, you stepped into really big leadership roles at global brands, moved across an ocean to do it. And you were dealing with all kinds of dynamics about How are you a leader that's respected for your subject matter expertise, but negotiating all kinds of business functions, transformative transactions, different cultures depending on where the business was growing? Really curious, from your perspective, looking back, maybe on those Cadbury days, what was the hardest part for you to overcome to be seen as the person that is as equally a business leader as a legal leader, and how did you do that?
Great question, Chad. I feel like at the end of the day, when you make that transition to, number one, stop thinking of yourself as a lawyer. You think of yourself as a business leader, someone who is as a business person whose skills happen to be augmented by the knowledge of the law, which I think I've heard you say in various different conversations, Chad, and I think that's absolutely true. If you have business acumen, if you know that business as well as any other C-suite executive, and you know all the ins and outs, you're embedded, your team is embedded, you know the strategies, the problems, the issues, then you're able to give and participate in a way that is far different than being that legal expert that people come to and slide that thing under the door. So I think it's really, as Craig has said as well, it's how you see yourself and how you kind of manifest that. If you see yourself as that legal expert that, you're going to speak in Latin and, I think you're going to be perceived very differently than if you're part of the team, knows the business, and can act in that way accordingly. And I've
seen you do that, Sherry, so many times in so many different ways, like practical things that I've learned from Sherry about how she does that. Your classic in-house mode, you're getting the emails, the Slacks, the phone calls, everything, come do this, it's fast. And Sherry would always say, stop. If you don't already know what the thing is, because it's something we've done many times, go and have the conversation first. And you got to understand, where's it coming from? What do they mean? Why do they care? What's motivating about it for them? Number one, you get the context to actually do the job. Number two, sometimes there wasn't even a legal thing to do. They just sent it to you because it was words on a piece of paper. And so, I think a lot about that human piece of being the example first, of going and pushing the conversation and not being afraid that your job is meant to be an executioner. You are someone who always demonstrates, I fully believe and manifest that my job is meant to be someone in a really friendly way that engages with you. I'm curious about what you want to do. I celebrate you and support you. Tell me more. And what does success feel like for you? My real first-time experience of doing that with you and then as a GC of a tech company was the legal work changes. The thing you thought you were going to do does not end up being the thing that you actually do, but it's because you leaned in first to the points that Craig and Sherry are making. So Anastasia, I want to come to you. We've been friends for a while through the LinkedIn universe, and I've always been looking for an opportunity for us to connect on something like this. And I thought this one was a perfect chance because you've led in many different ways. So yes, lawyer, but really interesting and captivating to me is the work that you've done in academia, in innovation, in data, in talent. And so when you think about the things that are indispensable to being an amazing legal leader that businesses care about, what is something that flashes to your mind immediately that if you're not doing this, you're not going to be indispensable? You must do this.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. I love this panel. I love doing anything that Chad asks me to do. For me, that one thing is curiosity. I think it's one of the things that actually gets taken out of our tool belt in law school, and is really hard to find after the fact, right? We walk into 1L year and we are told to focus on the issue. So we have all these other questions about how all this fits into a context, but we keep being told to get narrow and focus on the issue at hand. And unfortunately, if you graduate and you go into an organization, which is the majority of law school graduates, you need to understand how this all fits in to the context. And I think that if you practice, especially in a big firm, we reinforce that same idea of narrowness and lack of curiosity, because as it comes up, we're often told focus on the billable task at hand versus how does this fit into the bigger picture for my client, right? What is going on here? And so it was interesting to me is after I had left big law practice and gone into a legal tech company, worked with in-house lawyers in that context, and then was at Axiom, and we had all of these attorneys who were across thousands of in-house departments. And when I had someone who was coming straight in as an in-house lawyer, one of their challenges was learning that. Like, how do I get curious? How do I figure out what's happening in the business? What are we going to do next quarter? What is my role in this? How does HR function in this company? What are we doing in the sales department? What is taking up most of my time? Right? Like just getting really thoughtful about the context of the kind of questions that we're going to face as lawyers, is one of the hardest fundamentals to relearn after law school.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there. And I'm thinking back to those 100% finals where we were told like, type more or write more equals good. And that's not how it is when you end up wanting to be a business partner. It's not do more output for the sake of putting more words on a page equals pat on the head. No, that's old model. And business people don't think that way, right? Like business teams, if you work with sales or account management or product, they're always thinking, how do I do less better all the time? Because they're thinking in the quant, they're thinking in the numbers. And so if you don't, recalibrate towards being curious to find out what they really need and want, and what's the most efficient way to do it, we are acting in a way that does not make sense to the business. And so no wonder they feel like deer in the headlights where you're trying to show them the little berries, come out, and then they run away because they're saying, you're just gonna put 1 million words on the page, and I don't want that. I want someone who's helping me think through the challenge. And so I love the curiosity piece because there's a storytelling element to it. And if I've ever met anyone at a dinner that's great at threading a yarn and a story, it's Craig. Craig, when you think about first getting to the executive table, you're on behalf of legal, then you're on behalf of business teams. What is the thing that was hardest for you in telling a story that was compelling? Like you're telling it in real time and you're saying nobody's paying attention. And so like, what was the shift there when you realized like, this is hard and I have to get better at communicating the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Anastasia kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, I think it's how we show up right off the bat and the language that we use. When I started out early on in my career, when I was in, sometimes, exec meetings, board meetings, oftentimes when I would start or I would kind of, shift a little bit from the pure legal speak to the business speak, I would start off with, well, listen, I'm just the lawyer. So, I'm kind of, but I got some other things to say. And, at one point in time, one of my CEOs said, like, just stop with that, right? Like you just lose a whole bunch of credibility when you get into that. So I think it's important in terms of, right off the bat, in terms of how you show up and what you're going to do. I think, it's really important to, not overestimate, and whether you're speaking, you're at C-suite, exec meetings or board meetings, is the narrative and the amount of attention that these individuals have. So it's really important to, be really concise, have your, maybe practice with others in terms of what the story is, what your beginning point is, what your middle point is, and what your end point is. The legal jargon, is you got to get rid of, and you got to get rid of it really quickly. And then you got to kind of build in, what are the actual tangible effects, and you got to quantify it in terms of what actually is at the heart of the people that you're speaking to. So is it about dollars? Is it about brand? Is it about, go to market, et cetera, et cetera? Because if you start with, trying to explain indemnities and, all of that kind of stuff, you've lost your audience and you might as well just give up and go home. So I think it's really important to speak the language of the business individual.
Oh, we lost our friend. I mean, I think he's making an amazing point around like speaking the language, being the advisor, doing it that way. When it was my kind of time to be the legal leader, I think if we want to think about some really practical hows, in case any of this resonates with folks, I used to talk in scales of like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. I'd be like, okay, so on the risk continuum of 1 to 10, our company at this stage feels like we're probably good at a 6. And so when we're talking about this particular issue, it kind of fits in the 6 to 7 range. And, the go-to-market's pretty important here. That fits within our risk profile. People can understand that language pretty quickly. And then if they resonate with it and they grab on and they want to learn more, then you can layer the next level down if they want to understand more. But if we throw the whole bucket at folks straight out of the gate without keeping it in kind of the TLDR format that Craig was talking about, you lose everyone because they think that you're just going to be the lawyer. So totally with you, Craig. I always found a 1 to 10 scale for me was super helpful. Or if you're going to say 3 things, tell them I'm going to say 3 things. People remember things in 3s and 5s. And if you tell them, I got 3 great panelists and I'm about to introduce each of them. The first one is, people's minds automatically know, okay, I got to listen to 3 intros. I'm going to hear the first one now, so I'm ready on 2 and 3. If we just start talking, then people tune out. Someone who, is just the epitome of the example of how you build trust. Sherry, I've seen you do this, with many different business functions and different types of personalities. Some real strong, some real passive, you got to coax them out, some real friendly, some feel aloof and untrustworthy towards lawyers. What do you wish all of the lawyers who are watching around the world today would say to themselves about Sherry did XYZ and built trust? When you think back over your career, what do you wish people would know about how you successfully built trust? And maybe a way where you tried and it didn't go so great. What would you want people to know about how to build trust?
I had the good fortune of working for a company that really believed in people. And so I went through a lot of leadership development and talking about the strength of emotional intelligence. So, as a GC, I think your superpower really is emotional intelligence. It's, important for everyone. But I think that especially if you are in a leadership role, and I think what it does is it helps you will be able to empathize with people, you can communicate more effectively, and you can manage conflict. I think that a lot of people think that it's not like you either have it or you don't, but actually you can develop emotional intelligence. And so it's seeking out those things, how to be more self-aware, self-reflective, understand yourself and others in a much more intricate way. And I think that, I can't emphasize the communication thing more. It's knowing your audience, knowing what makes them tick, knowing what's going to land with them and what won't. And as you say, Chad, in some cases, it's going to be the sales, the revenue, the customers, and in some cases it's going to be the marketing message and the number of customers you're going to gain, or those types of things. And I think if you know how to communicate with each person and how it's going to land, that'll make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in here for 1 sec. I think because you kind of touched upon communication, and I think as legal, and obviously particularly when we're in house, oftentimes we called into whether it's the executive or the C-suite. It's not generally. It's when things are going well. It's when the shit has hit the fan and you brought in. And I think that one of the most important things from a communication perspective is to be kind of calm and collective. And very early on in my career, there were often times I would go in hot. And right off the bat, you're losing your audience. And it's really important because, sometimes the business individuals, there's a ton of pressure, the board, there's a ton of pressure. And to be that calming voice can do wonders. Even sometimes if you miss the mark substantively, which hopefully one doesn't, I certainly have before, but at least it's the calm and the collective, and to try and, then you get the audience. If not, you've lost them right off the bat, even if what you're going to say is absolutely brilliant.
What's so obvious about that as the recipient is like when you're in a conversation with a partner or a friend, and if you're getting really heated and they're staying very calm and curious, in your mind almost concurrently you're like, wow, they're being real helpful. They're not even saying anything. They're just not blowing back at you. And so your regulation eventually starts to calibrate down a little bit and the conversation becomes more thoughtful. So it's very obvious as the recipient of human communication. And then sometimes we flip our laptop open and we forget how human we all are. And that calm, composed style is so critical. Anastasia, I've always been curious because we haven't had a chance to really chat about this so much, but you've shared a little bit about the ups and downs of building novel programs inside of some of the most prestigious institutions in the US. That's hard. That's hard work. and you're doing it within the legal constructs, which is hard, academia, which is hard, you're standing it up, which is hard. And you've shared a little bit about, and generously so, on LinkedIn about like some of the hard parts and some of the really rewarding parts. And so, you know, just off script for a second, because I've always wanted to ask you, and now you're captive here. Curious for you about like when you reflect back on some of those opportunities, on one hand, what were some of the things where you're like, oof, I would do that one again to build more trust? And then two, where you were like, that really landed and I really built a real business partnership there and it allowed me to scale the programs. What do you think about when you reflect back on those times?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I've been a little obsessed around systems thinking recently. And I think part of systems thinking is understanding the system that you're going into, right? Where you're trying to build something. And then part of it is actually understanding your own system. And that one we don't spend a lot of time on, and it does connect with this idea of emotional intelligence. And so I've been very good at coming in and understanding a system I'm building in. It comes naturally to me. I'm an operator. I sort of see intuitively what's going on in the interpersonal dynamics, in the business structure. And so abstract projects don't scare me from that perspective. But I think what was interesting to me as I was going into some of these harder projects is understanding how I will react in that system. So if my natural inclination is to take on the things that are not being done by other folks, right, and overfunction in a system, I'm going to burn out, right? Just like when we were talking about resilience earlier. So you have to know for yourself, like, where you overfunction, where you underfunction, how does that function in the system that you're in, and what is healthy for you, right? Because you want to be able to sustainably continue to do the work that you are doing to be as helpful as you want to be. But if you somehow dysregulate your own system by overfunctioning, it becomes really, really hard, right? And that's where you have to keep going back between the external system and your own. And so some examples, right? Like, it was easy for me to come in and understand who my stakeholders were in building a large leadership program. And simultaneously, I think I underestimated just how static the system of academia is. So my inclination is change, innovation, disruption. I'm very comfortable in that. My audience may not be. Right? So learning how to message that to different audiences, and in a way where you have to create boundaries and distance of things you should and shouldn't be doing for your own well-being to sustain your own energy going forward. So I think my biggest tip as we go into any environment is learn and understand the environment that you're going into, and to your point, like, what's important to different stakeholders, but also yourself, right? Like, know how you function in different dynamics, understand your own biases, your own childhood, right? Your own underlying emotional triggers that are operating underneath the surface for you, because both are interacting in any system that you're in. And to be successful, you got to figure out how to balance both.
Yeah, that's so well said. Sometimes we think the work is jamming the new system, playbook, template in place, when anyone who's done it will actually tell you on the other side, the hardest part is the buy-in. Well, how do you get buy-in? Is you're showing up in a way, to the points that are made, are like calm, curious, collected, thoughtful, but also like patient and understanding. I used to say to sales teams a lot of the time that it feels fastest to go from like 1 to 8 and push out an agreement straight away or just accept everything. But then you get stuck at step 9 for a long time because not everyone's on the same page. Whereas it feels counterintuitive to be more thoughtful about who we are as individuals, who we're connecting with, why they care. So steps 1, 2, 3, 4 feel annoying and feel like a long time. Great news is you get to step 5 and it's like boom. And not only is it done, but people are off to a great launch point instead of then having to figure it out, you know, on day 1. And I can see folks in the chat talking about like building trust, but also like doing it at your, you know, everyone's gonna have their own journey. And I think, Anastasia, you were talking about this in terms of you have to understand yourself, you have to understand others, but knowing that everyone's on a different place on the continuum. I remember, you know, like for me, personal therapy has been a big part of my last decade plus, and I make sure to tell people that so that, you know, we don't keep that in the shadows. And I remember my therapist saying to me one time is that like, you don't get to control someone else's speed of understanding a concept. Like, even if they intellectually can understand, kind of to like what you were talking about with academia, they're standing up this program. It has a name in it that sounds innovative, yet there's an underlying force that isn't quite at the speed that you wanted to move at. And so I remember hearing that lesson and remembering that it's a hard lesson, which is like everyone's at their own place. trying to figure out where people are at, being empathetic to that, knowing that we were probably at a place there a little while earlier if we're further progressed, because if we don't have that connection point, it's all going to fall down. And that's really, I can see other chat comments about like, that is how you connect the dots between the functions, is like figuring out the overlap. Rob Hanna, who is the master of a phrase, has said like, if you confuse people, you lose people, which is like a great way to remember it. And I think that's really what kind of you all have been touching on so far. And so when we think about kind of what's next and kind of where it's going is, Craig, you now own these business teams as a totally different type of leadership. And so let's say that of the thousands of folks that are listening, they decide to follow the inspiration here. They want to stand up a business program or lead a cross-functional project or put their hand up to own procurement. What is a different way of leading a business team that you had not anticipated that you had to like get up to speed on than what you had historically felt was running a legal team? What have you learned in terms of running business teams that people could take away in case that's something that's motivating to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of touched on it right at the beginning, but I think there's an importance of understanding numbers, getting comfortable with spreadsheets. And actually, I think a lot of it is how one is ultimately presenting. It's very different when you're in a business function and you're, presenting the, what are the OKRs, what are the KPIs, and how you're going to go about it versus how we kind of come from it from the legal perspective. I think, and this is, I don't think it's much different on the legal side, but I think it's extremely important to focus on the solutions, in particular when you're on the business side. I think it's maybe equally as important on the legal side, but there's problems all over the place and there are hurdles and there's all kinds of stuff. But when you're putting up your hand or you're, moving into different areas and you're starting, whether it's project-based or actually taking on the function, it's figuring out what are the issues and what are the solutions. And then ultimately, again, getting into the quantification of, what is it going to cost from a resourcing perspective, from a cost perspective, from that perspective. I would say at this point, everything is about AI, so I got to throw in that. But if you are going to be taking on any kind of business function and you can quickly somehow adopt some sort of AI, I can tell you the CEO or whoever it is on the business side that you're trying to impress is going to be really impressed when you bring up AI and adopting AI. So make sure that no matter what you do, you're dropping in that AI word and actually turning it into some sort of tangible results, because that's ultimately, at this juncture, going to get everyone listening and listening fast.
Appreciate that. Sherry, when you're thinking about taking on new roles, new countries, new cultures, trying to understand a really rapidly dynamic boardroom table or management room table or a massive deal that was impacting an organization, how do you feel like you showed up and led in a way that gathered that engagement really quickly so that folks weren't looking at you as the legal eagle, but more somebody that cared about value? How do you find that you did that in the most stressful environments?
Well, that's a new one, Chad. I didn't get time to think about that one, but a good one. So I guess I would say there's a little bit about personal branding and thinking about that. And I don't think that has to be too big of a deal. I think you just have to have thought ahead of time. How do you want to present? And I like your idea about 3 to 5 things. Like, what are the 3 or 5 things that you want people to take away when they meet with you, when they interact with you, that you're capable, that you're approachable, that you are business minded, whatever it might be, have those things in your mind. And so when you're communicating with the board or the CEO or the president or whoever it might be, you've got that kind of thing in your mind, and you can use those as a filter in terms of how you're going to present things. And then also understanding, your audience as we've talked about before. I think one of the key things is that we are trained professional problem solvers. We have critical thinking, we have attention to detail, we're process oriented. All of those skills are so valuable to business. And so, you can easily, and don't limit it to law, like just, use it with everything you touch, because that's what is going to impress the people that you're speaking with. If you can solve those problems, whether it's legal or not, and show how your thought process works, I think it's going to go a long way at the end of the day.
Sherry, I'm thinking about something that Anastasia was saying about knowing who you are and how you react to things. And I'm thinking about what you were just saying about building kind of your own personal brand or your talk track. How did you decide what your personal brand was going to be versus what you thought it should be? Like, how did you cross that gap of like, Sherry Hozaki, and I'm, building this big career, and I've got this big job, and I've moved across the world, and I'm doing this thing, and I feel a pressure to be X, Y, and Z. But really, I'm A, B, and C. Or maybe there was some overlap. But how did you like refine who you really are and lead that way and leave some of the noise behind?
I think there was a turning point for me when I realized, I think most of my career, I spent it thinking, there's work Sherry and there's personal Sherry. And I think when I could kind of meld the two and say, actually, no, there's Sherry, and I need to be authentic to who I am. And when I was able to kind of embrace that, it just made things so much easier. I wasn't having to overthink, what was I saying? How was I saying it? What was I doing? You were just authentically doing what you do, building relationships, solving problems, and not worrying about all of the noise, as you say.
Yeah.
And I think just jumping in here, I think authenticity also comes with knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know, and being comfortable in your own skin, and just kind of getting back to when you're speaking to execs and board, as lawyers, everyone thinks that we know everything in every area of law, and it's really important because you build trust. If someone asks you a question and you say, "Listen, I got to get back to you," or it could be that the thing is so complex that you ultimately need to bring in external advisors. And I think it's really important to become comfortable, and that's where you build the trust. Because if you're trying to be the expert on everything, it's impossible, and it's just not going to be workable. And I think that's pretty powerful when you say, "Look, this isn't my expertise. I'm going to have to bring someone in. Obviously, bring in the right person that's going to, bolster one's own position." But I think that's really powerful.
There's a through line that I remember when I was in that spot, and you talked about it with the CFO, is when you're getting the pressure, especially if you're in a small legal team or you're the solo lawyer inside and they expect you to know everything, from notarizing letters so their kid can get across the border with their partner to some criminal thing to the actual work you're supposed to do, is I used to say to like finance teams, this is why there's also CA firms. And immediately in their brain, they're like, "Oh, I get that. Yeah, that's why they're CA firms." It's a different job with a similar starting point. And so we're an ecosystem here. And I think speaking from someone else's more relatable perspective sometimes can like move the conversation further than trying to explain why you, as a sole lawyer of some hyper growth company, doesn't understand everything from their family law issue to the AI contract they're trying to run. Anastasia, you do this extremely well. Like, you're very, very generous and vulnerable and real about your journey, personal journey, professional journey, things that have been difficult for you. And I'm thinking about the part that Sherry was talking about in terms of creating kind of the feeling that you are being yourself no matter where you are and seeing the success of that. You've shared a lot about like trying to discover and then rediscover who you are and what matters to you. And so when you think about, I know the last few years have been quite meaningful for you in terms of your journey. How would you describe, Anastasia 3-5 years ago versus the person who's here today in terms of how you show up as a leader?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is a tough one, right? We as we become professionals, we put on more and more masks. And I think those masks are a function of insecurity. They're a function of our perception of what we think we should be and how we should show up. And those masks get us further and further away from ourselves, right? So we sort of create this little prison for ourselves where it's like, work Anastasia is this, personal Anastasia is this, the two shall never meet. And fundamentally, the most important thing we do is figure out how to integrate those two. And to Craig's point, become authentic. Because if we show the world who we really are, the people who like us for who we really are gonna be drawn to us. Right. So I oftentimes say, like, I've lived 9 lives. I have shed so many different layers of myself. So if I look at like my baby lawyer self, very different. The beginning of my innovation journey, very different. Even 5 years ago, being back at my own law school, building something, very different. And I think I was trying to control other people's perception of me. And the sad truth is, you're never going to be able to control what people think of you, no matter how hard you try, right? People will still misinterpret that because they're looking at you through their lens, not your lens of what you think they're looking at, right? And so, like, stop doing the overwork. Really figure out who you are yourself, what you like about yourself, what you'd like to improve about yourself, and like show that to the world, honestly. And what I've noticed over the last like 4 to 5 years is as I've shown that very publicly on LinkedIn, the people who I like find me. And so I've gotten to build this really cool group of people who like me for me, and I don't have to pretend and have a facade and figure out what I convey to someone. I can just be me. And the right people find themselves to me and support me, and vice versa. And so life just becomes so much easier when you're speaking from your true authentic self, good, bad, ugly, warts and all, than it does when you're trying to mask yourself and the wrong people are attracted to that mask because it's not you.
You got more work to do. I'm curious before we move into a final question, another surprise question, but I'm curious before we get there, Anastasia, like, how did you do that? Because like, it's very courageous, it's very difficult, it's very hard, and I have no doubt that if, everyone who's on the other side of that wall, 100 people listening to you say that are saying, I'm sure a good proportion of them are saying like, that sounds right. But how did you do it for you? Everyone's gonna have their own way, but like, how did you start to make a dent in that journey of getting closer to who you are and being willing to share that? Was there like any sort of catalyst or something that you did that then you gravitated towards and you said like, oh, that seems right, and you followed the breadcrumb? Like, is there anything that jumps to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial work is self-assessments. Like, you have to understand yourself. So I love StrengthsFinder as an assessment for lawyers because it shows you what you're good at. And it helps you understand your blind spots, and it helps you see how you see the world. I also think that yoga was a big piece of it. I started doing yoga as a stress reliever my 3rd year of law school. I did yoga teacher training 9 years ago. And yoga teacher training, I tell everybody to do, even if you don't want to be a yoga teacher, because it's actually just self-discovery. It's figuring out how you show up for yourself. It's figuring out how you show up with others. It's figuring out the stories that you've got going on in your head. I highly recommend personal therapy. I think it's important to work with someone as you try to understand yourself. And just being curious in relationship and seeing how do you show up in individual relationships in your life, personal and professional? How do you show up in dynamics? It's taking a lot of responsibility. So I think we talked a little bit earlier about like lawyers are really good at finding what's wrong over there. We are real bad at looking in the mirror. And so use those amazing critical thinking skills that you have to reflect for yourself like, hey, what's my role in some of the stuff that doesn't feel good in my life, or some of the dynamics I don't really like? Am I perpetuating this? Am I enabling it? And then how do I not do it, right? And then look to your life and see, who do I have in my life who I trust, who I feel psychologically safe with, who I can chat about and get their feedback about how I show up in the world, right? It's cultivating communities. For me, it's my yoga community. It's my innovators community where we can speak honestly about the things that we're seeing, right? So it really is just getting really strong in yourself by examining yourself through a variety of reflective tools.
I mean, appreciate you sharing all of that, as you always do. I always think about when I talk to folks about therapy or any sort of even just like StrengthsFinders type work is our actions are a reflection, our outcomes are a reflection of our actions are a reflection of our thoughts. If our thoughts and mind is not in a great place, it's actually illogical from the lawyer logic training that our outcomes are gonna be great. And so if you want great outcomes, just reverse engineer it back to the core, which is up here. And if you don't spend the time and investment in it, then you will just be spending a lot of time chasing tails because you'll be exerting so much energy and not getting the outcome that you truly should get. We've got 2 minutes left. I want to give you an off-the-script question to close it out. I want to know 2 things from each of you. We'll start with Craig. Craig, I want to know the worst leadership advice you've ever received or heard, and then I want to know the best that you've ever heard or offered. What's the worst advice to be a business leader? What's the best?
The worst advice. You've put me on the spot here. Don't go with my gut. I would say probably has been some of the worst advice that I've received, because usually my gut has generally always been right. The best advice I would say has been get out of your comfort zone and rather do something and fail than not do it at all.
Well said. Well said. Sherry, best and worst. I think we lost your audio, Sherry.
Apologies. Yeah, I think this is a really good question. It's hard to say. In terms of the worst, it would probably just be like, just get on with it, like just do it. And I feel like in some cases that was great, but in business, sometimes you got to think it through, right? People just want things so quickly all the time, and you shouldn't feel bad about taking a bit of time to be thoughtful about it. It's easy to be pushed into fast. I think the best advice has been to be yourself and be authentic to who you are. Because I think it was quite transformative for me to be able to relax, the shoulders down, and just, approach things as I would in my personal life as well. And that's about relationships too, right? So how do you build relationships? How do you build trust? How do you, it's not about the legal relationship. So I think that would be it.
I love the part about the authenticity piece, because it also scales leadership. Like, if you're real, we all know, we have a good sniff test, right? If someone is just saying lots of ChatGPT words, but they don't actually stand behind what they say, you can smell it out, and you're not gravitated towards them. If someone's being real, even if they're saying, to Craig's point, don't know if I know the answer yet, or to Anastasia's point, it's like, I'm figuring that out, I'm trying to be curious and figure that part of it, don't know yet. Sherry's point to say, I'm gonna slow down, I'm gonna think this through. It's very credible. And credibility is contagious. So I love that, Sherry. Okay, Anastasia, we gave you got the most time. So we're lucky to come to you for the finale now. Best advice, worst advice that you ever heard, received, given?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you build a leadership program, you get a lot of unsolicited advice about leadership. And so I think the worst leadership advice I've ever heard is just work hard and things will happen, right? I think that is from people who have gotten very lucky in their lives. So that there's a much more nuanced way of success than just working hard and hoping to get noticed. I think the best leadership advice I got is when I started managing a large team, and I was told to, put my ego aside and prioritize my team. I think it's hard when you're an individual contributor, like many lawyers have been trained to be. When you step into a position where you're leading others, they're the priority, right? You got to take care of them. You have to explain things. You need to train them. You need to protect them from some political fire. And it's really important. Get your ego out of the way. Take care of your people.
Very well said. My partner reminds me all the time, the hardest thing in the world is separating your ego from the situation. And, I try to take that to heart. She probably does a much better job than me at doing that. But I think your point, Anastasia, is so spot on, that if you remove the ego, you can start seeing things more clearly and you can be more helpful for everyone. So I knew this would be an incredible panel. I knew we'd cover more than which seat to position yourself in on the big round table, because you all have led in such a human way and have been such a big inspiration to me in a variety of ways over the years. So I want to say massive thank you, Craig, Sherry, Anastasia, powerhouse conversation. I hope everyone tuning in was taking notes. This is how, as a lawyer and as a legal leader, we create connection, we influence good decisions, and we create better outcomes. Thank you all so much. We're going to head out west now to Vancouver. I'm going to send it to Brianna Richard, our Director of Strategic Accounts at Goodlawyer, who's on site with Riley Graydon, partner at MLT Aikens, our partner sponsor. and they're a champion for legal innovation in the West. Brianna and Riley, how is everyone doing at the Vancouver watch party?
Hi, I'm Brianna Richard from Goodlawyer, and we are coming to you live, actually pre-recorded from our West Coast Summit Lounge here in beautiful Vancouver, hosted by our partners and the sponsors of the summit, MLT Aikens. We have a full room of excited and really energized lawyers here today, and it's an honor, and I'm thrilled to be introducing our co-host for the summit today, a very good friend of Goodlawyers, and he's gonna hate that I say this, but an absolute legal force, Riley Graydon, a partner here at MLT Aikens.
Thanks, Brianna. What a great morning it's been of touching and informative conversations. As Western Canada's largest law firm, we are so proud to work with Goodlawyer to sponsor the West Coast Summit Lounge here in Vancouver.
It's been a privilege. So from the West Coast, we're ready to continue leaning in, learning, and progressing the future of law together. Vancouver, let's hear it. Make some noise.
Woo!
I would love to also have been there, but coming up next. Okay, so let's keep the momentum going, and we're gonna move on to our next panel. Now, this one really hits close to home for a lot of us, and it's also something we're trying to figure out in real time. This one is called Values, Vibes, and Vacation Days. Now, from boomers to Gen Z, every generation in law has a different take on what makes work meaningful, sustainable, and worth sticking around for. This isn't about trendy perks, fancy cookies, or vague mission statements. We're talking about what it really takes to build cultures that attract, develop, and actually keep the great legal talent. What values actually matter? What makes people feel seen? And yes, how many vacation days is enough? Now, let me introduce today's panelists. So first up, we have Angela Jackson. We've got she is the director of legal at Uber, and Angie is leading legal operations inside one of the world's fastest moving companies, and she brings a very deep understanding of how values show up in high performance teams. I've known Angie now for several years, and she is both hilarious and whip smart, so I'm always excited to have a conversation with Angie. Next up, we've got Kristen Taylor, who is managing partner at Castles and one of the very few women at the helm of a major Canadian firm. This is a big achievement, as many, many women know. Not only is Kristen walking the talk when it comes to evolving law firm culture with empathy, accountability, and staying power, but she's also bringing the sparkle back into her world, and I'm very excited to hear more about the what, the how, and the why. And last but definitely not least, we have Erin Bayer. Erin is partner at Renault & Co. and co-founder of 4L Academy. Erin has trained hundreds of lawyers to think differently about legal practice, leadership, and building community. He's one of the profession's most respected legal voices and on modern legal training, at least in part because he is always open and honest. Fluff and surface words just scuttle away scared when Erin shows up. Now let's just dive in. Okay, so first question, I'm gonna pick on you, Angie. You work with lawyers in a leading global organization. What kind of values do you see that feel universal across all the generations? And then second part, which ones you find are the ones that are shifting fastest in the newest generation of lawyers?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Pauline. Working at Uber is very interesting because you are working generally with much younger population. We have a lot of young professionals across the businesses, but also within legal. So I would say looking across our global teams, the one value that seems very constant, no matter what geography you're in or what generation you're coming from, is a drive to action. I think this is very consistent in the legal profession going back no matter what time you came up. There's lots of type A perfectionists. There's a lot of drive to achieve, to be recognized. And then where I'm seeing a bit of a change generationally is around authenticity and being your authentic self at work. And this is showing up in ways that are interesting. People are bringing their personal values to the workplace in a much more transparent way and demanding the same from their companies. So they're wanting to know the stance their employer is taking on global issues. They want to know whether their company is supporting their personal values when it comes to sustainability or diversity, or when there's world events, they want to know where the company is standing on those issues. And in a way that is different, I think, than in the past, they're also demanding answers. You see this with shareholders, but you also see this with employees, and they want to know where their leadership stands on these things. So I think to retain great talent, companies need to lean into that more. And then also when you're looking at what work you're giving your teams or how you're getting them involved, I think there's less of a priority on necessarily always having like a high visibility project, where the focus now seems to be getting to be on a project that means something to them personally, that either plays to their strengths or allows them to feel confident, or pushes them out of their comfort zone and allows them to go into an area where they can express their curiosity.
Yeah, definitely. I see that as well, but also in many ways, frankly, I feel that as well. And it has, I think, just based on my experience, it feels like when I can be in a workplace where I can feel comfortable showing up, saying the things that talking about the things that I care about, and putting that out there, and not only is it accepted, but it's supported, and these are the things that we are doing. If you care about that, you can start working with us on these things because we know that this means something to you. I feel like it's something, frankly, that I think I've learned from the younger generation, and I think it's to benefit of all of us if we can sort of stop the parsing out of this is professional and this is personal. The two will never, ever meet. I think that is unfortunately impossible. I think also it's probably been a source of angst for a lot of people that it's not actually that easily separable. So yeah, that's wonderful, Angie, thank you. Kristen, you're next. I mean, I think there's no question that law firms have always been sort of a bastion of tradition. As managing partner now, how do you strike the balance between tradition and modern expectations? And specifically when it comes to flexibility and well-being in such a high-pressure environment?
Thanks, Pauline. Can I jump in on the last point that you just made? Because I so agree with it. And I think there's actually a lot of studies out there that support the fact that it is such a huge productivity loss for people who do not bring their authentic selves to work, who have to cover or pretend to be something they're not to be. And it's just such a complete waste of time. So all in on the authenticity, if you will. Balancing those traditions and flexibility, if you will, in terms of where I think certainly my firm and I think all law firms have to move is tricky, right? So, you know, a couple of examples. We had a retired partners lunch just last Friday. So brought in the people who built this place 20, 30, in some cases 40 years ago. They get a lot of respect. They come in, they interact, they see what the firm is like today, how it's changed. So trying to maintain really good relationships with that also helps, if you will, in terms of people being more comfortable entering the retired partner, that part of their life, right? I think a lot of partners, the older they get, the further off they try to push their retirement because we so define ourselves by our work. And I think actually, in a weird way, we gained a lot by COVID. We learned a lot of lessons coming out of the pandemic, right? So one, from a sustainability standpoint, we don't need to print pieces of paper constantly. We got rid of filing cabinets. We did a lot of good things for the environment, if you will, or certainly killing less trees. Being on planes less and using technology, all of those kinds of things to really work seamlessly. And we also realized that we didn't have to have somebody beside us in the office to know that we could trust what they were doing, right? So it built that trust in. And we've seen a bit of a U-turn boomerang, right, in terms of firms wanting people back in the office. I'm personally very opposed to mandates. We didn't do a mandate here. We have said we expect you to be in unless you've got a reason not to be. So, and we're comfortable with that. Weirdly, I think the world just kind of caught up with me because I did that when I had my first child 24 years ago. I always adjusted my schedule. And if you build trusted relationships with people, funnily enough, they will trust you to to do what you need to do at whatever time of day you best suits you to do it. So that flexibility, I think COVID has really advanced things. I kind of had to fight for it a bit. Now I think it's just part of who we are and it's part of the DNA now.
Oh, yeah, love to hear that. And especially, actually, again, back to the authenticity point, I don't actually think that you can build these trusted relationships when you're not being authentic, because like, who are we building the relationship with? Who is this and what do you need, right?
Agreed.
If you're not speaking out about the things you need, and this sort of actually goes back to what Lena and I were talking about as well, is that setting the boundaries, asking for the things that you need, certainly not placing blame on people who feel uncomfortable doing that, because this is unfortunately, I think, what we have all lived with for a very long time. But if you're not being authentic and asking for what you need and telling people these are the boundaries, then nobody knows. People can't do anything without that information. Granted, I can see that there have been plenty of people, I'm sure, who have shared these things and then it did not go how they wanted and they were punished for it. So I do think there's a bit of a balance here of people need to be, people need to feel comfortable sharing and being who they are and asking for what they need, but at the same time knowing that on the other side of it, they have someone who will help champion or support the things that they need to do their best work. And honestly, it's so much energy to not be yourself. Wouldn't we rather just have them being themselves and instead let's reallocate that energy to the work that is already hard enough as it is, right? We don't need to be
make it harder.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need to make it harder. So I think this also actually ties in really well to Aaron. You're a huge proponent of building environments that reflect how people think and how people work best. I love this so much. So how can legal leaders create cultures that support this and make it a lasting change?
Pretty simple. You start by paying no attention to the legal profession and looking solely outside the legal profession. You read about, you listen to, you learn about best practices. How did I learn the stuff I know? I wasn't born with any knowledge. I'm autistic. I understand nothing intuitively. I just read all the books and went, great. These best practices, actually, all the management best practices, what Gen Z and millennials want, all this stuff, it's all the same thing. It's that authenticity stuff, about treating people as people. It's about understanding human needs. It's about understanding that everyone is different. And this applies in all industries. There's nothing different. I run a fully remote firm. How did I learn to do that? I read the book called Running Remote, which is the blueprint for running remote businesses. And guess what? Those businesses existed pre-pandemic. Right? This wasn't a new thing. Hybrid is, to me, the worst of all worlds. But either way, to run hybrid properly, you need to learn how to run remote. And you also need to learn to run in person. So, if you haven't read the book, The Culture Code, start there. That's, I would say. And there's a couple other great books too. You start there and you ask yourself, are we doing these things? The answer will be no to 95%. And then you go make them happen. And, I do a bunch of consulting with organizations like law firms and other businesses who want to, change their culture. And anyone who thinks this is easy, it's not simple. And if anyone's looking for another good book, Brene Brown's recent book is fantastic. It talks about transformation and things like that. In most cases, the culture is crap because the culture is the worst thing you tolerate. And the worst thing you tolerate from rainmakers is a lot of garbage, usually. And so, there's no quick fixes, is my point. In most organizations, these are multi-year efforts. And I needed to sort of run my own firm to do it my way. And even then, I joined the firm a little bit after it started, and I had to totally rebuild that culture. And there's so often a difference between what people idealize, like what they want the culture to be, and then their reality, because building a culture and keeping it and getting rid of the people you need to get rid of and living your values after you first figured out your values and documented them and done that stuff is hard. And it requires a level of accountability that most people aren't comfortable with, requires a level of decision-making and sticking to your values, and it requires good hiring and good onboarding and firing people. And none of these things are things law firms or legal organizations are great at. Lawyers are trained on none of this. How did I learn? I read all the management books and the leadership books and the hiring books. And so, you do that by learning best practices, experimenting, implementing, and probably get a coach. Because if you're doing this for the first time, you're going to make so many mistakes. And depending on your timeline, you might want to move faster.
Yeah, 100%. I certainly, I think, of course, we all want change. And we all, I think, want change now and as soon as possible. But it is very hard. And I have so much empathy for, I think, people who are trying to make that kind of change in an organization where you're redesigning, you're rebuilding, you're revamping, but there's so much existing. I think John Lindsay said it earlier. There's so much existing baggage. And it's not so easy just to say, okay, this is what we want to do, and then we're just going to do it. There's a million different voices out there. There's a million different stakeholders out there with competing values and competing, exactly what we're talking about, the different generations. We value different things, we care about different things. Some of us are actually trying to learn the new values and be like, oh, actually that does matter to me and I do care about that. How do I implement this in my everyday life? Let alone, how do I take this to work and try to change everything around the organization so that it can be more aligned with what I'm thinking about right now. It's hard, but at the same time, I think, and actually there was a post by Anastasia Boyko just last week, I think, that was talking about doing hard things. And it's really just a matter of one hard thing at a time. You maybe start with a smaller one, but then as you build the momentum of doing these hard things over and over, it becomes this muscle that you're like, oh, I've done that before, I could do that again. And I'm just gonna worry about what happens after. And as you said, you read all the books, you do all the things, but then you're gonna experiment and you're gonna make mistakes. And really, again, this comes back, for me, it comes back to me telling the kids, it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. You're not learning and you're not making good changes if you're not making mistakes. And then now as I say that to them, I'm also trying to get that into my own brain and trying to help myself. So, okay, Angie, so along the lines of, again, more action, what are the practical steps that in-house leaders can take to create cultures where high performance doesn't come at the cost of career sustainability?
So for me, this really comes down to trusting your teams, trusting their professionalism. Nobody goes through the slog of becoming a lawyer to then not be treated like a professional. It's not just treating you like an adult or like a person, but it's trusting that you will get the work done, trusting that even if I don't see you in the chair in the morning, I know you're doing something productive, and that you demonstrate flexibility and offer flexibility in the broadest sense of the word. It's not just, oh, well, we give you Fridays off, or, oh, we're going hybrid, that's enough. It may be, like myself, I don't like to come into the office early. I like to come in around 10 a.m. I just don't like being on the subway when it's packed full of high school kids. So having the flexibility to be able to do that makes being in the office 3 days a week fine. But you also have to demonstrate that. If you're not, as a leader, taking advantage of your vacation time, taking advantage of the flexibility in your working hours, taking advantage of your benefits in a way that is visible to your team, you can tout those benefits all you want. People aren't going to use them because they're going to be afraid. And then when we were talking earlier today, when you were talking with Lena and you were talking about like, oh, how embarrassing or tough it is to say to your boss, oh, I might need time off for counseling, or I might need that. Part of that is not requiring people to do that and just trusting them. If they say, oh, I'm out today at 3, that's fine. That should be the end. It's not, oh, well, what are you doing and why aren't you here? To me, it wouldn't matter. Are you taking a phone call from the nail salon? Great. Are you taking the phone call from home? Are you going home to have a nap or walk your dog or do some laundry? None of that should matter. And I think it's just making sure that when you're offering flexibility, you're doing it in a way that you're not only valuing reasons for being away that you think are legitimate. Like, I think thankfully we're at a time now that the idea of, oh, I need to go out, leave early to pick up the kids or do the school run is no longer a controversial thing. But it might be if you're saying, hey, like, I just really need a nap. I need to go home. Like, and that should be fine. It shouldn't be just what you see as a justifiable reason to maybe not be getting FaceTime at work.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a very good one, Angie. And I think it really speaks to how every single person is dealing with different things in their life. Maybe it is for themselves, maybe it's their families, maybe it's friendships, whatever is going on. I think the ability to just, like, as you said, have flexibility to go take a nap, that's just what happens to be what I need because this is whatever. All the different reasons, but honestly, I shouldn't have to explain any of that. And you should just be able to trust me that I'm doing the work. And honestly, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that if I didn't do the work and I'm not providing the value and I'm not doing the things I need to be doing, I'm pretty sure all of us can spot that. And we know what that looks like and we know what that means. And then it goes into one of the hard things that Erin's talking about. Yeah. If this is not working out and you are not doing the things, then I guess it looks like you have to be fired. But not because you're having a nap in the middle of the day. Yeah. But because you're just not getting the things done. If you get a nap in the middle of the day and you get the things done, I don't care. What does it matter? Yeah. You like to sleep during the day? You're a vampire? Wonderful. Awesome. So, Kristen, back to you. Now, how can law firm leaders embed values into your daily operations so that they become a little more tangible lived experiences, especially for the next generation?
So I think there's two things come immediately to mind. So one is using your voice. Wellness became a real priority for me when my teenage daughter attempted suicide in 2017. Just about everybody here at my firm knows about that. I have used that as a story, to remove barriers to talking about it, to normalizing conversations around mental health. We used it to launch a number of supports, additional investment in counseling, the Calm app, reimbursing for coaching, training on growth mindset, those kinds of things. But talking and being authentic, back to your original point, and relatable so that there's not a barrier to those kinds of conversations, which are so critical, particularly I think with our younger generations in the workplace. I think is, that we value people's wellness and how they're doing. We care about the people, right? And then the other piece that comes to mind, and I think you've got people in my office in Toronto just upstairs from me right now. When we were designing this space, we wanted it to reflect our values. So we put in a wellness center. There's a room for a nursing mother to nurse or to pump, whatever's needed. There's a family room for somebody who needs to bring their kids to work before they go to an appointment or something, and we've got coloring books and a bunch of toys and that kind of stuff in there. We've got a workout room, a yoga room, showers, that kind of thing. And then one of the things I think I'm most proud of in the design is that we went from having massive partner offices to having standard size, small offices with light that everybody benefits from. So we took the offices off the perimeter so all of the light feeds into the space. And I don't know if you can tell that I'm squinting right now, but it's because there's too much light today, which is a good thing in November in Toronto, don't get me wrong. But it's an equity kind of thing. Like, why shouldn't my assistant have the same access to light that I do? I feel better in the sunshine, even if I'm squinting, than in a dark room that I sort of feel like I'm trapped in to do my job. So those are kind of two of the values type things that we really did, like literally embed in the space. There's different flexible working spaces as well. You can work on a couch or a chair by the window, or like there's lots of different options. But I think, when you talk about embedding, like that stuff's embedded here for the next 16 years for the life of our lease. So you can do some we had obviously had the ability to do it because we were creating new space and moving into it and designed it from the studs up. There are harder things when you've got existing space, I recognize, but even just trying to talk and making small changes to put in rooms where, working parents understand that they are valued people in your business, right? And the organizations that we're working in, I think, is really important.
Yeah, that actually, well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing that story about your daughter. I think that a huge part of what is really helpful for our profession is the sharing of stories and experiences like this. Historically, we don't talk about those things. And again, it's back to the, professional over here and personal over here, but it's how do you come to work and be your professional self when this is what is going on at home? And so again, it goes back to, I don't think it's separable. And that's why I think it is actually just so important for people to share these stories. And, maybe not everybody is sharing it in a, public forum like this with 2,000 people watching, but it doesn't matter. Whatever, even if it's those one-on-one conversations, I think that it's so important for people to hear about these things, and it brings it back to the human level of what do you need to feel good at work? And when we share these things, people also understand, yeah, this is just another human beside me who's trying their best in life. And yes, I work with them and they're doing all of these things professionally, but how can I support them so that they can show up as their best person professionally when there's all this other stuff going on personally? That's beautiful. I'm going to actually follow up a little bit on that one. This is, I mean, it started last year with the sparkly jacket, but there's always lots of conversation, I think, around dress codes in the law firms, and so I'm just curious, in your world, what does that look like?
I think we dress for our day. That's the dress code, basically. So most lawyers will have a suit jacket. I've got one in my closet behind me here. But I wear a lot of sweaters and pants. I've worn a suit, twice since the pandemic, and we came back from it. So I think there's a flexibility that, I don't feel comfortable in a structured jacket and those pants and a blouse kind of thing anymore. So I don't do it. And I don't think anybody's trying to impose that on things. I think the funniest thing that happens is when we do student recruitment in the firms, all the lawyers have to wear like a suit or get super dressed up because the students come and they expect it. And I'm like, wow, are we being authentic? Like, they should know that they don't actually have to dress this way when they are working here. So anyway, I've still got some work to do around bringing that down to normal, but I think we need all of the firms to agree on it, and good luck with that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember a long time ago, I used to work with a partner that I think he was trying to change everything and would come into the office in jeans, with some rips in them and I don't know, the t-shirts with the paint on it, but it's hilarious. There was always it was Friday casual day, and then a little while later, the Friday casual day was taken away because he, apparently they said we just couldn't handle the paint on the t-shirts anymore. So, I mean, not to say that is what people need to wear to work, but in some ways it's as you said, if I'm not comfortable, I'm not doing my best work, and I just need to be comfortable. If I'm seeing clients or if I'm speaking, different story. There's different dress codes for all different events, but I think it's nice to know that things might be relaxing in that space a little bit more, because it is, again, comes back to if I'm comfortable, I do wonderful work. And sometimes that is wearing the things I'm wearing right now, other times it is in pajama pants. And so that would be a nice day to be able to work from home. So I just wanted to say, too, that we've got some great comments in the chats. One is, this summit is group therapy for our legal community, from Ikra Musada. And then we've got Vicky, who's saying that she loves the concept of designing your space to reflect your values. Now, actually, Erin, on that little comment right now, designing the space to reflect your values, just curious, how has this worked at Reno?
I don't know if I can share my screen. We'll see. It's a lot of trust you have in me. It's really simple. Follow Brene Brown, do what she tells me. So, one thing is, great activity every organization should do. What the heck are your values? You should figure it out, because most people don't know, and most people have different answers, and it's great activity if you're starting a culture change project. We stole ours from GitLab, which is one of the top remote organizations in the world. They've got a massive handbook. It's an incredible resource for anyone who wants to lead, and theirs are great. We like them. They are aligned. Collaboration, results, efficiency. In the old days, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We still believe in that. Not sure everyone else does. Iteration and transparency. We default to transparency. In so many ways, and then trust is our last one, and that includes accountability. Which a lot of organizations don't like, because accountability is hard, and it sometimes means you're gonna make other people feel bad, and that's okay. You gotta do it with empathy. But accountability is not the same as shame. That shame is sometimes what other people feel when they don't like being accountable. Anyways, my point is, what do? We figured out our values. We write them down, and they don't sit on the wall. We've got recurring zaps that go off in our Teams chat every week. We are constantly talking about them. We hire based on them. We fire based on them. We coach based on them. It's not a theoretical thing. It is not a one-time activity. So to us, and to me, our values are the most important thing. If you breach them, we talk to you. If you breach them repeatedly, you get fired. And when people are joining our team, we're very clear on our values. They're part of our hiring process. We disclose it. We're not for everybody. We don't want to be. And the worst thing we can do is destroy a great culture by hiring people that aren't a values fit. Diversity is great. Love diversity. Really like cognitive diversity too, not just the stuff that people like to put on their websites, but we don't want diversity of values whatsoever. We need aligned values, and then we need a diverse range of people within that, anything else is a problem. So if you don't know your values, it's tricky. And if I can just go back to a couple things you mentioned earlier, the working parent stuff is key for this generation. I have a 3-month-old and a 3.5-year-old. I'm a very involved parent. I work a lot of jobs and do a lot of things, right? To be able to have that flexibility in my day is huge, right? If I have to be in the office, we don't have an office, but if I had to be in the office at a certain time and work a certain way, like it wouldn't work at all. And it's funny, at my old firm, talking about suits, like I was wearing jeans, for the last, 8 years. And certain more senior people did not love that because I had not earned my place. And my point was, what problem am I causing? I never see my clients in person. No one cares, and they're dressed casually, and they're tech clients, so they definitely don't care. And at one point, I was just going to sarcastically start wearing suits only on Fridays as a joke, and then I remember I hate suits. And I hate sleeves, so I didn't do that. But my point is, there's so many of these things where so often we have these rules that, you sort of peel back the onion, and you're like, this doesn't actually make sense. Like, what are we worried about? And I think that's really important. But yeah, on values, figure them out and then live and breathe them. And if you don't do that, that's the hard part. Then they're not real. And then you may as well not have them in the first place.
Yeah, actually, totally agree. Especially the working parents is, of course, near and dear to my heart. I've got 2 kids. They're 7 and 10, so like I always say, I'm not wiping bums anymore, but now I'm learning that small kids, small problems, big kids, big problems, and I'm now finding that out. And it's just exactly as you said, there's just times when, whatever is going on at home with the kids, I just need to be away. Or frankly, I'm going to go help them do something at the school or whatever it might be. And I just don't have the energy and time and effort to be popping in and out of the clothing that I'm wearing or, all the different things that I need to think about. I often say that I feel like we are running, in our household anyways, with all the activities and all the things, we're running a business there. There's operations, there's logistics, there's, the transportation, there's so much going on. There's social community liaison. We are doing so many things back there, running a business essentially. And it all has to happen in the hours after I leave work and before I get to work again the next day. And if you think about it, I think in that context, a little flexibility goes a very, very long way. Now, I do have a question for all of you. So if each of you had to finish the sentence, tell me what you finish it for me. So law would be better for everyone if we all had insert. I'll give you a couple minutes to think, or a couple seconds. And then whoever wants to go first can just jump in.
I can jump in. More empathy and adaptability.
I love that. I love that. I think those that go, I get that some people, adaptability I think is a learned thing, but I also think that life is just so much easier when you can kind of go with the flow and adapt to things and change. And certainly I think empathy is a huge one. Kristen, thank you for bringing that one up. I feel like everything around the world would be a little bit different right now if there was just a little bit more empathy from everybody out there.
I'll go next, building sort of on what Kristen's saying. I would say the law would be better if we all had more curiosity and not necessarily, I think we're all curious about the law and learning. That's table stakes, but more curiosity about our coworkers, about our teams, and about their lived experience.
Oh yes, I also love that one so much. I think that's exactly what we were talking about earlier in some ways. Like when you're curious about what is going on with the people that you work with, I think that's where the real conversations start, and that's how you actually build that trust. How can you build trust with somebody who you don't really know? And if we're just in our cubicles, 9 to 5, doing the thing, well, not 9 to 5, but whatever the hours are, doing the thing in your cubicle, and you're not talking to anybody, the door is closed, how do you ever get to know anybody? And how do you ever actually care about people? And how do you ever actually build something better when you don't know what people need? So good. I love that one, Angie. All right, Aaron, best for last?
And Angie stole probably one of my go-to things. To me, curiosity is so key. It's literally so much of coaching work, like introducing people to new concepts, making them do these things, helping them understand, the training, all of this stuff, being curious, because so many problems, the answers are out there. Lawyers are surprisingly bad at looking for them and getting started, and they're very good at obviously lawyer uniqueness. So like, oh, this doesn't apply. It does. And the second piece is like excuses for not having enough time, and I call them excuses. Like, yes, time management to me is the biggest challenge that is consistent across this profession, and it's something I deal with it too. Built the best course on it because nothing else was working and nothing else sort of tied together this profession. But a lot of time management is just not knowing best practices and not experimenting and not being accountable. It doesn't make it easy, but you would be amazed at the things like how we run our firm and the stuff we train on internally, like are 0% being done in other firms because no one's gotten curious, no one's thought outside the box. And so it's maybe to build on what Angie was saying, to me, it's curiosity, but it really is a sense of what is possible. And stop looking at what other firms are doing. Stop asking, stop caring. Just assume if they're doing it, it's not even worth your time. Like, I find nothing inspiring, other than Kristen's firm, of course, I find nothing inspiring by looking at other firms. So like, look outside the industry, like dream big and ask why not, instead of asking who else. And when you ask why not, you'll find a very different answer to your question than if you keep asking who else.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to bring it back to the kids. I actually thought that I had quite excellent time management skills. And then I had kids. And the first one, okay, maybe I thought, okay, I think it's still working. I think I can do this. Then I had the second one, and it was just complete chaos, utter chaos. And that's when I realized, turns out I don't have time management skills, and now this is something I need to learn. But I also love what you said about not looking at what others are doing. I think that, I think it's normal to do that. I think it's very normal to look around and see, how are we keeping pace? Are we the same? Do we need to do something different? But I think that actually the last part is where most of us forget, is that we're looking at everybody else and we're like, okay, about the same, that's good, let's keep going. And then without asking ourselves, wait a minute, how can we be different? What is something that we care about that I don't care if they care? I don't care if this matters to them, but it matters to us, and how can we build something that is different and that actually matters to the people that are in this company, in this firm, in this organization? I love that very, very much. Thank you, Erin. Well, thank you so much for all three of your time. I have wonderful hopes for a brighter future of law, knowing that we've got your voices in the conversation. Thank you so very much for being here today.
Thanks to Pauline, Angie, Kristen, Erin. I knew that was going to be an honest conversation. I knew it was going to get a little bit spicy, and thank goodness for the three of you with Pauline to do that, because if we don't talk about how we're seeing things differently, what's working, what we're striving towards, then we never grow. So what really stood out to me is really how the personal leadership and culture are just so impactful, but in different ways in every organization. There's no one size fits all, and the same goes for our careers. There's one more conversation before Josh closes us out, and it's a big one. And it's about evolving a culture alongside our careers. We're going to talk to two folks that I'm sure you will know very well that are going to teach us how you ditch the ladder and build the life. Because the single ladder to being a partner or GC or whatever it is you thought you were supposed to be, that's gone. I've experienced both ladders myself. And today, we have lawyers and leaders that are building very intentional careers that fit their values, their goals, and their lives. And so with these two folks that we're going to chat with, they're going to share how, whether it was personal branding, whether it was digital platforms, fractional roles, portfolio careers, these folks are going to share what is possible when you are willing to break the mold you think you're supposed to live. So let me introduce you to two of the biggest names in the legal world who have done exactly that. First, dear friend Rob Hanna, founder and managing partner at KC Legal. Part of Rob's life, and this is what we're going to talk about, just a part of it is being, one of the premier recruitment agencies in the UK. But also, we know, and we can see in his background, that he has the biggest legal podcast out there, sponsored by Clio. Rob's been doing it for years. He's interviewed hundreds of leaders, both in the industry and complementary to it. And Rob always is shining a light on others bringing insights and reflections. He's always candid. He's always a champion and supporter. So glad to have Rob Hanna with us. And Laura Frederick, who, it's a real pleasure because, we've only known each other until this panel from afar. And, Laura's career, I think, has covered such an arc that is like a really nice reflection of today, because she worked at one of the largest law firms. She worked at one of the biggest companies in-house that's in the news every day now. She built her own business, How to Contract. She built a personal brand online. She's brought her online business into becoming her full-time business and with in-person conferences. Laura's done it all while also sharing the personal journey that has come with the ups and downs, many of which folks have already talked about today. And so I think that, the way that Laura, you've shared what you care about, what you're building, how memorable it is. There is no one that does the daily cartoon about legal life the way that How to Contract does, is that you're instantly, kind of burned into my memory about someone who's taught us how to be a great lawyer, but also how to figure out who you are in the process. So this is going to be an incredible conversation. I do want to note that unfortunately, good friend Brittany Leonard was supposed to be on it. Jet setter, travel changes coming back from Europe. Unfortunately, we couldn't have Brittany, but I know that we have an all-star conversation coming up with Rob and Laura. Okay, let's get into it. Rob, you have interviewed and talked to, whether it's through the podcast or through your recruitment agency, countless folks who are innovating and building, designing something that means more to them. When you think about kind of the story arc of, let's say, the podcast, what is one of the threads that jumps to your mind about how you are seeing folks try to find something that is more meaningful to them instead of something that just pays them in exchange for skills that they've learned?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you ever so much for the warm introduction, Chad. And it's good to be back. And it's an honor to be collaborating with Laura, who's a real rock star. And we've both had both of you on the Legally Speaking podcast before. So, yeah, I think I'm going to come in with some hard truths to start with when it comes to building these meaningful careers with all these people that I have interviewed over the years. And I think that the first truth is everyone is jealous of perhaps what they've got, but no one's jealous of actually the ways they've gone about doing it. There's a lot of hard work behind the scenes and work that they've needed to put in to enable to have these meaningful reflections and meaningful careers that you perhaps see online on LinkedIn and so forth. The other thing, and I think it's been touched on a few of the previous discussions, is around fear, because everything all of us ever wanted is the other side of fear. And I know, Laura, you'll probably talk about this a little bit later on, but I just wanted to kind of set those couple of points. In terms of people that have actually got on and actually those top innovators, things that I see from people building meaningful careers, the first point is actually they see their career like a business. So what I mean by that in practical terms, they're very intentional, they're very passionate. So they see their skills, the relationships, the contacts, and the reputation they build up as an asset, and they protect that, and they're continuously building on top of it. The second thing that these successful people do that go out to build meaningful things is they skill stack and they contact stack. So every career move, every career change, every new contact they make is not only just a contact, it's a relationship can be further nurtured that could lead on to more successful things down the line. And a big aspect of this, and it was touched on, I think, on a couple of the other conversations before, is around energy. I believe everything is energy, because when you find that passion, you find that enthusiasm, you carry that forward in your career and you're able to take more accountability. And that's a key point, self-accountability. I may have said this last year, but if it's meant to be, it's up to me. So people taking these bold, courageous moves are very happy to take self-accountability. It's a really key point that lots of people need to understand, that, again, to make things happen for yourself, you have to be self-accountable and not point the finger at others and accept, actually, if I'm going to do these things, maybe it might be I want to make that move from a law firm to move in-house. Maybe it's I want to become that general counsel. Maybe it is I want to set up that legal tech businesses. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. They're very intentional about how they do it, the energy that they bring, and they also understand that their journey is not necessarily what someone else has done, and they're very happy to create and be their own ladder and not ride someone else's ladder. It's a very key point.
Yeah, appreciate you, Rob, and reflecting back so many of the conversations that you've had about folks who decide to put themselves in the middle of the situation and start building it themselves, because the email isn't going to magically drop into your inbox that is going to say, hey, Laura, I really think that you should just have this How to Contract business, and here's these amazing, cute, funny, hilarious, thoughtful cartoons that you could just use every day. Like, nobody's giving that to you. If you want to build it, you have to do it. And so, Laura, when I think about you worked at one of the biggest brands in Big Law. You worked at one of the biggest global companies there are. To a lot of folks, you'd climbed the top of the ladder. You're there. You've done it. And so really curious to hear about, it felt like you'd made it. To everyone who looks at you, probably felt like you'd made it. What was going on in you, in your heart, in your mind that was saying, this ladder isn't the final rung for me, and there's something else? What was it that was inspiring you, or maybe it was the pain or frustration that was really the catalyst to help you redesign something that meant more to you?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And also thanks so much for the introduction and for being here. I'm so excited. I watched last year, so it's exciting to be on stage this year. In terms of that, I knew I had been taking my career in a lot of different directions. I didn't follow a straight path. I also didn't achieve a lot of the things that are external achievements. I had the places of work, but over a 24-year-ish career before I opened my own firm, I was assistant general counsel maybe for like 6 months. Other than that, I was always senior counsel. And I interviewed for some general counsel, deputy general counsel roles, and they always required me to do something other than my favorite thing, which is contracts, as you can tell. And so each time I interviewed, they'd talk about, well, you'll be in charge of this compliance thing or this whatever. And immediately, I'm sure my face revealed it. It was like, oh. So I think a lot of my career has been like staying true to what I really enjoy and seeing my career as an opportunity to do what I want. And the crazy part was that I got, after all these years, I'm working in-house. I was at Tesla, and really loved my job. It was my favorite job of my whole career. I was working with a great team. We were doing big things. There was a lot of professional respect, both inside and outside. It was just really the pinnacle and kind of everything I wanted. But there was still something missing. And I took a good year to kind of figure out why this wasn't enough. And I even interviewed a couple places and I'm like, this isn't better than what I have. What is it that's missing that I'm yearning for? And somebody told me to find your word. And this was before the whole, I think it's become very popular in recent years, but this was back in 2018. And someone's like, you got to find your one word. And so I figured it out. And for me, it was freedom. And I didn't have that freedom to work with the people I wanted to work with, to do the kind of work I wanted to do, and be in charge of my direction. And that's ultimately why I opened my own firm, was to have that control over my life so that I wasn't stuck working in ways I didn't want to, with people I didn't want to, on subjects I didn't want to. And it was a scary, scary thing to assert that for myself. And to say, you know what, I can make it, even though I've never run a law firm, no experience getting clients. I've been in-house 14 years. I had 0 clients when I opened up the firm. Nobody even saying, I'll hire you when you do. So it was I had 8 months of savings in the bank that I could live off of. So I was like, okay, I get to 5 months, I'll go find a job. So I'm doing all my fear setting kind of stuff in there. But ultimately, I just had to bet on myself. I had to say, I can't live a life where I'm not going after everything I want just because I've come this far. And which brings me to my favorite phrase that I remind myself of all the time, which is, you haven't come this far to only come this far. And I love that so much because it reminds me, I've come far, but I have so much further to go.
Wow. I think the really nice thread that you're pulling from the panel around winning in the C-suite is, I think Craig was talking about how you lean into things that you don't know yet. And for him, that was like a very powerful thing to bring him into some of those business functions. There's 2 words, it was about 5 years ago, that I feel like were a big change for me. And they were the words like for you and for me. And they've become very powerful for me because when I hear people say really smart things, whether it's the 2 of you, whether it's anyone else that's on the panel, there's a lot of credibility in my heart and mind when you're saying things. And so my nature is to like take that and run. Laura says, do this. Rob says, do this. I start doing it because you're credible and you've been successful. But I think the through line is, what is meaningful for you? And so, for Craig, as he was telling his story, it was like there's an opportunity to lean into procurement and customer assurance, and he was excited about that challenge, even though it was hard. And I think you're sharing a story where you're saying you had a similar conversation, and your gut instinct and reaction was, no, thank you. I'm willing to do something else that's new and something real hard, but it's not that thing. And so I think for the thousands of folks that are listening, it's asking yourself, like, for me, what is the thing? And the part that's really helped me take good advice for what I need is when, if Laura's saying that was the way it worked for her, and I say in my mind sometimes, like, I'm so glad for you that that was the thing, because it allows me to be happy for you without feeling the onus of like taking it on. So I appreciate you, like, it pulled the thread from earlier this morning about how people can have either direction depending on what they want. And I think about, this storytelling piece, Laura, you were talking about. Rob, you're pretty much the master storyteller. You pull great stories out of people. You share great stories. You share reflections in a way people can remember. You feel like a very charismatic person to everyone. But the Legally Speaking podcast wasn't the #1 Legally Speaking podcast show back then. Clio wasn't sponsoring it. So when you first started, like, what were the parts that were the hardest, the most uncomfortable, when people told you, like, just run the recruitment firm? You're doing great. Why are you doing this other thing? Podcasts aren't a real thing. How did you feel about that? And how did you work through it?
Yeah, and thank you. I think for people who might have been tuning in last year, I talked about this, but we were in a comfort zone. We were running a recruitment business. It was doing fantastically well, but we all know the comfort zone is great, but nothing will ever grow there. And I didn't want to get stuck on complacency, because I believe boutique is beautiful, and we were small, we were nimble, and there was creative people within the organization saying, hey, have you heard of podcasts? And this was way back when, in sort of 2017, 2018, not 2025, when it was out and about. And I thought, well, let's take a risk. Let's actually think about what is the opportunity, not what if it goes wrong. And that's a really important mindset piece for people to take away from today. A lot of people say, but what if it goes wrong? What if we don't make the money that we could be making just focusing on the recruitment? Where actually we took the view, well, what is the opportunity if we go out there and create this podcast? What is the opportunity if we build this community, we build connections? What is the actual overall opportunity of building thought leadership and doing something different and cutting through in a busy world? What is our actual point of difference? So we took that approach. And then when it comes to the storytelling piece, Chad, which is so important, I was speaking to Laura and backstage about how you and I actually originally connected through our stories through my late grandfather I talk about, and how we bonded and connected through that, because facts will tell, but it's ultimately those stories that will sell and connect with people and evoke emotion, and people will buy in to you, because the powerful stories that that people tell are the ones that actually have been spoken about you when you're not in the room. That's how you know when it really lands. But in terms of getting the actual strategic side of the podcast, I'll probably loop in where Laura was talking about her one word before around freedom. We understood very earlier on that you needed a TOI, which was a topic of influence. So we didn't just want to set up something like a podcast without any strategic thought. So I went and studied lots of podcasting course. Steve Olsher, fantastic podcaster, nothing related to legal, but mastermind very early on, really cracked podcasting. I went onto his courses and I upskilled myself very quickly. He said, if you're thinking of starting a podcast, think about your topic of influence. And your topic of influence is that 1 or 2 words that you want to be known for within your industry. So for me, a lot of people know the word legal as a broader sense when they think Rob, red jacket, legal. As a further extension of that, it's probably legal careers or legal technology. So we're always talking to with the way our journey has evolved. And that's ultimately how we've looped in conversations with the likes of Clio, staying true to that topic of influence, those 1 or 2 words we want our content, our community, for us to build trust around and collaborate with, linked to that TOI. So my biggest encouragement to anyone, if you're thinking of starting any initiative, what are those 1 or 2 words you want to be known for that people are putting into maybe ChatGPT, into Google, where you are going to come out for? And if you can build authority and really strategize around that, you'll be super successful and you can cut through, because there's a real reason why not many shows do 450 episodes, become a top 1% in the world, as you very kindly said. All the great things we've done is because we've had a strategic understanding of where we want to talk to, where we want to go, and we've been laser focused on that, and we're building a community around that. And as you know, we've built a lot of energy inputs around the show to build broader community through events, through a podcast and paddle tournament in Dubai, through going out to IB, through all of these things that we're doing to inject community. But it all comes back to how can we educate, inform, and build trust with our audience, but also have fun along the way.
Rob, I think when people hear you speak and they see the podcast, it kind of feels like this was a natural outcome of just your, predetermined destiny. But I'm curious, and I know that, we've talked about this a little bit too. Your grandfather was, a very well-known lawyer in the UK. There was some downstream pressure around you taking on a professional designation such as that. And what you're doing now is obviously deeply embedded in the industry, but probably complementary and not exactly on the bullseye of what the downstream pressure was expected of you. Lots of folks are looking at you too, saying like, yeah, I get all of the strategic and tactical things you're talking about. How do you get from 0 to 1 when you've got parents or grandparents or friends or partners who are saying like, you're making good money, just do this? Like, what did you do, Rob, when you were getting this pressure from folks being like, no, how did you get through it, especially when you probably weren't as great a podcast host as you are now in episode 1, 2, 3?
And that's a really great question. And ultimately, and this may be a tad contrarian, people that love you may give you advice, but it may not be the best advice for you. I think mentors and people around you, I've had really good mentors in the business world that have really understood what I'm doing professionally and saw the ambition, maybe the drive, my entrepreneurial flair, and have helped nurture and maybe give me information, because we're drowning in information, we're craving wisdom. And the mentors that I've had have given me really strong wisdom to actually say, do you know what, Rob? Yes, maybe your late grandfather at the time would want you to be a chartered accountant or to be a lawyer and carry on the fact, but that's not you. You're a salesperson. You're really good at building relationships. You're really good at going out there and business developing and bringing people together and injecting your energy. You've got to play to your strengths here. So I would actually give a shout out to mentors of mine that have been able to really unlock perhaps some of the hidden talents and that limited belief I may have had way back when. And as a result of having that sort of 360 board of mentors around me, people above me, people the same level of me, and even people beneath me that have greater skill sets even today, particularly in the world of social and the attention economy, which we may talk about, that helped me unlock and take action. Because the key point is with all of this is just starting. And the reality is, sometimes you've got to be careful with some of the information you absorb from people that maybe love you, that perhaps don't fully understand your full big picture in terms of where you're heading. And actually people in your professional world who understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve maybe have some good energy, some good insights and some good ways to educate you so you can really go on to your passion in the real world.
Oh, it's well said. And I think it tracks what Aaron Bear was saying in the last segment around values, vibes, and vacation days about look elsewhere, not just those right in front of your face to like gather inspiration. And, Laura, you've been an inspiration for, hundreds of thousands of people, because not only have you built something professionally that's very captivating and meaningful and helpful, you've also been really generous and courageous about sharing your personal journey too, which has had many of its own, like challenges and your kind of recoveries and then thriving and back to a challenge again. And you shared about your house the other day and it's like, we just moved here and then we had a big problem. I got to move again. I got 4 kids. How did you overcome like the fear and judgment when you're leaving a company like Tesla to say like, well, I got 8 months of money, so I'm going to get at least 3 months in and hopefully, like you're at one of the biggest companies in the world. You left one of the biggest law firms in the world. When you built How to Contract, you left being a lawyer. Like when you feel the judgment being pushed on you, how have you found yourself successfully overcoming it, or where do you think you failed at times?
Yeah, it's always been a little bit of a challenge, I think, for all of us, especially though, we're overachiever types and we're aiming for some achievement that we think we're supposed to get. So even though, for example, I gave that example of the general counsel roles and I interviewed and I didn't really want it, I still felt that pain, like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I want it? I should want it. This is the ultimate, this is what all lawyers go for, and I'm giving that up. So I think a lot of it was learning to just listen to myself and count on myself. And I think also going through a lot of the troubles that I went through, my dark years, as I call them, it basically removed me from a lot of worrying about other people, because life was just show up at work and get it done and then take care of my kids. And that was it. For many, many years there was very little of anything else because I was in survival mode. And when I came out on the other side of survival mode, I was stronger, but I was also so much more independent because I had gone through all that and I had learned so much about myself and I had learned to trust myself. And I did a post the other day, like learn to make those hard choices and learn the power of those hard choices. So for me, I think by the time I got ready to go out on my own, it wasn't as hard. And I don't think I could have done it 5 years earlier. I don't think even I could have done it 10 years earlier. I think it was getting through, kind of going through the fire and finding myself on the other side just gave me so much more strength and awareness of what mattered to me because I'd been tested and pushed to the limit. So that awakening that I had by going through all these terrible things really gave me that sense of calm almost, that I don't need to do what everybody else thinks. I don't need to do what everybody else does. I'll do my path and find my way. And that's, I think, ultimately where it came from.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And as you were sharing your journey and then how you built How to Contract, I was actually thinking in my mind that if we had found each other, 7, 8 years before, not that it would have been the right outcome, but like you would be the perfect persona of like a fractional lawyer at Goodlawyer. I think about someone like Sherry Hozaki, like massive career in big law, massive career in-house. And I think the education piece around like building a career that's meaningful to you, and I think the one piece around like starting your own solo shop or being part of a fractional umbrella is there's an education piece that I feel personally responsible for, which is these lawyers are not other. Laura is not other. There is like very few lawyers that can stand up against Laura in a contract negotiation. And yet she built her own solo shop. So this thing around like, why are people doing this? I feel personally responsible to educate the market on there is no other way you could find a Laura. It would be so hard to find her. But when she stands up her own shop, she's bringing all this experience, you join a community of people wherever it is you find that community. That's really powerful. And these are not folks that couldn't make it. These are folks who are designing something that means so much to them. And so I really want to appreciate you for sharing that. And Rob, when you're talking to folks that are saying like making good money, add a good brand, want to do something else, how are you coaching them to think about designing something that is really meaningful to them when they're so scared to make a change? How are you helping lawyers think through that process?
Yeah, and it's a really good point. I think the first thing we're trying to do is basically get them to understand that they can design their career around their life, and it doesn't just have to be a ladder. I think so many people have been accustomed to, you join a law firm, you start as a junior, you rise to the ranks senior, maybe you want to be partner, or then maybe I need to jump to be a general counsel, maybe I need to. And the reality is we have options now, with the birth of legal technology, with the birth of so many things that we see out there, you do have the luxury of choice. Over here in the UK, for example, there's an organization called Gunnar Cook that's only been going a good few years, and they're already nearly at 1,000 lawyers. And that's the dispersed consultancy model. It's giving people an option. Why do people like that? Because it can be flexible. It can work around family time. If they want to be on a beach sending a laptop, they can be on a beach sending an email. They don't need to be in the office 5 days a week. So I think we really coach people to, what is it you want? What is it you want? And really go deep into understanding that. Don't give me the surface level answer that you would probably answer. And actually, I say a really good way to think about this is sort of segueing slightly, but it's actually when you think about when you can get something really, really good. Brian Chesney, most people know, the founder of Airbnb, he has a great synopsis about whenever you're trying to think or innovate or improve things or your line of thinking, they talked a lot about what would make a good Airbnb experience, right, for a customer. And then they would go into a room together and they would ideate. Okay, they'd have the meeting, they have the answers, they rip it up. What would make an even better experience? They ideate, they go away, they rip it up. What would make an even better experience for that? Now, the point is, maybe from that example, maybe someone arrives and their favorite drink is in the fridge. That's good, but we could do better. Maybe they rip that up. Maybe they arrive, there's favorite drinks in the fridge, and maybe they've got an embroidered towel on the bed with a welcome message to them. Maybe the next step is they rip it up. The host has created a bespoke local itinerary for them in line with their interests. So what I'm saying when it comes to individuals and their own career moves, what is it that you want? No, what is it you really want? We go deep to understand. We don't just take the surface level answer. And so we really coach them through asking the right questions, getting the right buttons, really consulting with them to go deep, deep, deep for what it really is that they want. So then we can ensure that we can provide them with the really high quality things that ideally they're looking for, because so many people just make a move because perhaps they're not getting flexibility. Maybe it's not in line with their values, and they jump to the next thing. That's the worst thing, because 2 or 3 years later, they're looking, they're unhappy, they're miserable, and your career has so many profound impacts on your entire life. If you're not happy at work, you're inevitably the shell of the person. You're not the present parent if you're a parent. You're not the present partner if you're the partner. And it can have so many knock-on effects. So when we talk about the why, we talk about the whole why and what it is you want. And we go deep into understanding that. And once we've understood that, we can have a serious conversation. So we need to build that level of trust up. And through building my own personal brand, through all the collaborations and content, that is actually when I'm having inbound people coming to me through my personal brand. An element of that trust has already been built. And that's why I'm a big advocate for building a personal brand. Not a perfect brand, it's personal brand. So be authentic. I know that's been talked about before. And then when people come to you, you can hopefully have deeper conversations off the back of that trust that you've built by the persona you've put out there. And then you do the work as the consultant to really ask those questions, to really get to the heart of what they want. And then you go all in to deliver for them.
I appreciate that. I was reflecting as you were talking about when I was going through different transitions from big law to in-house and traveling the world in between with my partner, and then building my own business and then joining Goodlawyer. Is like each phase had a point. And I think sometimes we get tricked that the starting point has to feel the same way for the end point, or because we don't feel super happy now, it means everything was a disaster. And if we leave it, then it's embarrassing or shameful or a waste of time. And what I started thinking about in trying to coach lawyers when that was the main part of my life for a couple of years is like, what matters to you in this phase of your life? The phases change. Naturally, we grow, and personally and professionally, we grow. Intellectual curiosity, financial, maybe it's stability, maybe it's autonomy, whatever it is. Like, you got to figure out what matters to you in this phase, because it'll give you peace that, like, it's not like the rest of the way. I wouldn't have gotten the in-house, I wouldn't have gotten the flexibility to travel without having worked in big law. I probably wouldn't have got the in-house job without the experience that I had before. I wouldn't have got the opportunity to be a GC without that first in-house experience. Nothing's wasted if you're trying to be periodically reflective of what matters to you now. And so, Laura, I think you've done an amazing job of like trying to figure out what matters to you in this phase. And I know that you've got a busy personal life. You've got an incredibly busy professional life. You've launched in-person conferences for how to contract. And something we talked about as we were kind of thinking about this call was you said, what's funny is I don't go to any other conferences. Yet you run one and host one in person. And so on this theme of like what matters to you in this phase now and knowing yourself, maybe share with folks like, how did you come to the decision? You're one of the biggest names and faces in the legal industry. If you went to any conference, you'd be mobbed, and that sounds like good news for your business. You don't want to go anymore other than it's your own. How did you get to a peace and a contentness in that decision?
Yeah. And I'll say it's hard because it's kind of like everybody else does it one way and I'm being pulled to do it a different way. So what's wrong with me? Why am I giving this up? There's something I'm missing out. Some personal failure is causing me not to do and pursue this success in the same way everybody else does. But if anything I've learned over these years of last 5 years of doing this, which is I have to lean into what works for me, because whenever I don't, then I'm unhappy. And as long as I generally am excited and happy and going to work and showing up all day and all of that, and I feel good, I know I'm in the right direction. And as soon as I start to feel like I should, that's always my danger word. It's like whenever I feel like I say I should do that, I should do that. And what I realized, because I had talked to some people about doing more conferences, I'll, go and be a speaker for this company here, or go and be a speaker for that there, or I should go because I'll be able to promote my business. And each time I thought, well, I don't really want to go. Why should I go if I have to? Business is fine. I'm making money. Like, there is no need to do things that I don't want to do, especially because of the business that I built doesn't have investors. There's no co-owner. I get to do what I want on any given day, as long as I'm serving my customers and clients. So it's been a beautiful way to be able to pivot whenever I feel like it. But I mean, there's also the downside of it, is that feeling of I am not going to conferences where maybe I could do better. But at the end of the day, you have to honor yourself and you have to honor the fact that what what brings you joy? What aspects of business bring you joy? And for a lot of people who have similar kinds of businesses like mine, they love all the social stuff. They love going to dinners and setting up meetings and doing all that. And at one point, I was like, I really need to do that because everybody's hosting these dinners. I got to get some sponsors. I got to get them to pay me and host dinners. And then I thought about it, and as much as I love people and I love hanging out, the idea of having to travel all over and then be on for those evenings all the time, I was thinking, well, that doesn't sound fun. Again, love people, but it just isn't me. Because when I do go to conferences, I just went to one in September where I was speaking at University of Miami. Wonderful people. It was law students, for God's sake. Like, just the easiest community possibly. It wasn't any lawyers judging me because I wear costumes and do cartoons. And I still felt uncomfortable because I'm thinking, what should I be doing? I should be doing something. And for whatever reason, I have this mindset, but it's okay. Like, I don't have to change. I don't have to be different. I can just do my own thing. It's working. Why beat myself up over something that maybe is a little different, but there's really no real big downside to any of it because it all still works.
It's a really hard piece to come with. I think for me, a couple of things that when I was living a lot of what you're talking about was I was watching the downstream outcomes. Like, I'm a big soccer guy, and my team, I got them to play at the field very close to where my office was, and I made sure the games were at 10 p.m. so that I could make the games. And I remember at like 9:45, I'm still typing away, and I'd be getting the text messages, "Hey, you coming to the game?" And I'd be like, "Hey, give me a break. We still got 15 minutes. Like, I still have time to make." And then, as a parent, I could see it also seeping out of me in a negative, dark way that didn't feel representative of this one thought that I try to always hold close, which is, if I closed my eyes for the long sleep right now, would I be happy with what I gave and what I tried to achieve? And if the answer was no, for me, that's a very impactful statement, because today I do feel that way. There's lots of things I still want to achieve, and our daughter's only 6.5, and there's so many things I want to experience with her. But if that unfortunate thing happened, I would feel like, at least in this moment, I'm trying to honor that. So I appreciate you pulling all those threads together, Laura, and how you've done it. Rob, I wanted to come to you on something.
I was just going to add one thing, if I could, to your statement about, that. And actually, I've been doing the same thing. I just started doing this about 6 months ago, which is, if this is my last life or last year on this earth, and there's an opportunity, for example, I get, opportunities to partner with people to pursue different things. Will this have been the way I wanted to spend my last year? And unless I can say 100% yes, I just say no to those things. So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
That's very courageous to do, right? Because there's tactical things on the surface that seem so obvious to folks that you should just do it. So it is a courageous thing to do, but I find it also allows you to feel like you're living every day instead of just living milestones of counting cash at the end of the month or whatever the milestone is for you. So good for you. Rob, I wanted to ask you, because you feel very impenetrable in terms of how much success you've had, right? It's like not a lot of folks are thinking to themselves, boy, Rob's really struggling. Hasn't really figured it out. Not sure he likes his podcast thing. Everybody feels like everything's cooking. I'm curious for both of you. Rob, I'll go to you first. What is something, and we didn't plan for this, what is something that you feel like right now you want to design better for yourself, personally, professionally, that is in this next chapter where you're like, I feel like I'm a little bit on the ladder maybe on that one, and I've got to design the life a little bit more. Is there anything in your mind? Because I know you moved recently, you've got a new family. Is there anything on your mind where you're saying I got to design that a bit more?
Yeah, and I'm kind of already doing it. I just want to also reference back to that piece of the conversation I love between you and Laura's exchange, and it's what a mentor said to me in terms of, he said, "Rob, I want to empty my head before I'm dead." And I thought, what a wonderful way in terms of wanting to give back. And another analogy, just because I think this is so important, Chad, in terms of us really living enriched, full lives. I was at a talk with a gentleman who brought out a toothpaste, an empty toothpaste, or what seemed an empty toothpaste. And he said, "What's this?" to everyone. And everyone gave random, obscure guesses, they were all wrong. And he said, do you know what we do? Typically with the toothpaste, we squeeze it right until the end, until we get that last bit out. I want all of you to live each day of your lives with that intensity, that intentionality, squeeze every bit of juice out of it, and you'll be successful. I just wanted to share that because I think that was such wisdom that just landed so well with me and leads nicely onto something I think I could be doing better now. Chad, I've invested in health this year, really intentionally my health. And I was actually inspired by Jack Newton, the CEO. Most people will know of Clio, who's been running for over 20 years. And I've been going to various Clio cons. And I was just like, this gentleman is just doing incredible things in the world of legal tech, but they're still finding time to run. So I said at the start of this year, I want to be, I'm 40 next year, a bit of a milestone birthday. I want to be healthy, active, and be able to do things with my daughter who's 4 in 2 weeks' time, that I can run and be energetic. So I've started running and injecting and intentionally planning my day around my health. So to Laura's point as well, no investors in my business. I run it on my terms, on the way I want to run my life, and a pillar that I am not refusing to negate on and where I'm adding more and more energy inputs is into my health. And guess what? My profits are up, my overall everything that I'm doing, my creativity, you've seen what we've done with the show this year, the relationships we've built, the energy I'm injected into people, the things I've said yes to that I would ordinarily probably say no because I just haven't had that energy. So a core pillar I've really been intentional in designing my life and my business around is health. And by the way, I'm not talking about hours and hours of time. It's an hour a day. It could be 20 minutes running. It could then be some cardio. It could be some other parts of it. But it is a non-negotiable pillar that I am designing my life around. And I feel so much fresher for it. And I encourage everyone to not put it as a secondary, because our health, we only get one body. And if we need to look after it, it's the best thing you can do.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I know that's been a big journey for you, and we've seen it online, and good for you. I can see it, like, yes, of course, like, I'm sure you feel fitter from all kinds of superficial metrics, but I can tell from like how you're showing up that you feel even better. If there even was another level of positive, Rob, I can tell that you've unlocked that this year. Laura, curious for you, like, you shut down the firm, how to contract, you brought it in person, you've moved multiple times, you're running a very busy life in total here. Like, what is something that's on your mind where you're like, I've done all of these things, but there is something else that's on my mind that I should be trying to refine or design because it's meaningful to me?
Yeah. And I think where I'm looking, and this is my kind of 2026 plan, is to continue to expand beyond, for all these years, I've really focused in on me as a 4th year, 5th year lawyer. I was desperate for someone to show me the answers. It always felt like there was this secret book that they all had, that they knew how to do contracts. And I just wanted them to tell me so I could do it too, because it was all based in that anxiety of not knowing. So all these years of doing how to contract, it's always been to that person. And what I'm realizing now is that that's too narrow. And I really want to expand beyond just trying to help the lawyers, because I'm already serving a lot of people who are in non-lawyer roles. So that's been going on. So now I'm intentionally moving forward with some new things coming next year that are going to be a broader marketplace, into more supply chain folks, into more regular business folks who are dealing with contracts, because they are all struggling too. And nobody's really focused in on how do we teach the everyday businessman, the everyday businesswoman, how to deal with these contract issues. And I think they need that guidance too. So I'm excited. And of course, continuing with the fun and the playful and the silly, and that'll be part of it too. So going all in on that as well. So you'll have to wait till next year to find out more, but that's my exciting new thing. But I'll tell you, it's always on the verge of like, everything's going to fail at every moment. Like, there's no assurance of any success. Robert could be the same way. Like, we both could just, the interest in us, our phase in the world or the legal community passes and people are on to something else. That certainly could happen. So really it's all about what speaks to me, what community do I want to serve? Because that's always about service. And as long as I stay laser focused on who I'm serving, I know I'll end up in the right direction, at least for me, regardless of how many people tune in or don't tune in.
I like that tune in or don't tune in piece, because I remember when I first started writing on LinkedIn, maybe like 4 years ago, I was trying to write something that mattered to me, but I was trying to write for something that I thought would engage people. And then what I realized very quickly is that, like, if you don't get energy from doing the thing, you're probably not going to do it that much longer anyway. And so I'm always looking for something that is like bringing me energy instead of I can do it, but it's consuming my energy. Like, I'm gonna leave today with more energy from having had these conversations, doing this live stream, all the work we put into it, because I find this very interesting and captivating and inspiring to me. And so whatever the thing is for you that draws you in, that's the thing that is something to investigate. And then at least you can get a data point of like, was it interesting? Would I listen to a podcast every day for a week on that topic? If you're gonna get bored after one podcast episode, it might be something you feel like you should care about, but you might not really care about it that much. And so if you're gonna make massive leaps, like Rob and Laura have done, and many others we've seen today, ideally you're trying to find the breadcrumbs that are pulling you in, because that gives you this like natural gravitational pull to keep learning and to also share things that are meaningful to you, regardless of how many clicks or engagements or podcast guest invites that you get. Rob, I'm curious, final words from both of you. Something that's on your heart and mind that maybe we didn't talk about today, that if you're reflecting upon earlier, Rob, or conversations that you've had, is there anything on your heart and mind that you want to make sure you let people know that's either something difficult that you had to figure out or that you wish other people would know because it would give them kind of a jump start through a challenging time?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, if I could just steal mic time here. I think one thing I would say to people, just piggybacking on what you were saying there, Chad, when it comes to be around radiators, not drains. The reason I wanted to come back with absolute pleasure is I get a real radiation of energy from yourself, Chad, the Good Lawyer community, seeing your posts and what you've built and what you've put on today and you continuously put out there. That is a community that radiates a positive energy that I want to be around because it inspires me. It wants me to bring my A game and it wants me to come and learn, which I have done throughout today. And folks, don't forget, when you spell learn, you actually drop the L, it spells earn. So the more that you learn, the more that you will earn. That's why coming to things like this are incredible things that you could be doing. And I think the thing that I'm most passionate about, I guess, going into, which I haven't talked about, is a whole new concept on top of the Legally Speaking podcast, which I was speaking to Laura about off air, which I think is going to be huge, which is Courtside Conversations, which, if you haven't seen, is an initiative where we are blending podcasting, which we've been doing for many, many years, with paddle, which is one of the fastest growing sports in the world, which is likely to be an Olympic sport, with PR, because we likened it to networking is boring. A lot of events can be quite stuffy. We're bringing in a bit of sport with a bit of entertainment with a bit of opportunity to network in a whole new way. Likened it to, you play a sport, you have a post-match interview. You can paddle, you can podcast, you can network, you can have drinks, you can have fun afterwards. So it's something I'm very passionate about. We're starting in Dubai in January next year. We're going to take it all around the major legal hubs around the world. And so we're going to have a paddle passport. So if people want one, to come and get stamped and get a tournament position, be part of the next new thing that I think is immersive networking and opportunities, then that's something I'm passionate about. I'm going to be going all in on in 2026 as an extension of the League Speaking podcast that I'd love people to know, and another community play that I think will do super well.
Oh, that's beautiful, Rob. And like FYI, my partner and I were trying to get brave enough to travel across the ocean with our 6.5-year-old, and I would love to be in person with you to play padel. It's some of those, beautiful Spanish courtside pictures that you've been sharing online. So I'm going to connect with you separately if we get up the courage to do that. Laura, kind of the final thoughts on, we're going into our closing speech after this. You've got the mic here. What is something that's deeply meaningful for you that you would love for thousands of lawyers around the world to know?
For me, I think the best life lies on the other side of those hard choices, of getting past your fear, but also of calming your inner voice, because we all live such chaotic lives, especially families, career, pressures, all this sort of stuff. And for many years, I didn't have the ability to kind of know what I wanted because I was so consumed with all the energy that was around me. And it wasn't until I went through these hard things that it was like, I'm not going to survive this without therapy, and I need to take some time. And it took many, many years to kind of sort through all those things inside. But now I bring with me this this peace inside me because I went through all those things and I did the hard work to figure out what's important to me, to learn how to trust myself, to stop saying I should do this, I should do that, and just be okay with whatever path I'm taking as long as it's listening to myself. But I don't think you can really truly listen to yourself until you clear away some of that clutter. And whatever way it is for you to get through that, whether it's friends, spouse, therapist, whoever it is, but finding a way to kind of lean into painful things, lean into difficult places that you've been hiding from, because the more we squash down, I love the analogy of the more you try to hold the beach ball underwater, the harder it is to kind of keep going. And so if you release that beach ball, you are free. You have all this energy for everything else. So that beach ball really represents all that negative energy, that hard thing inside that you're kind of walking away from and trying to ignore and just keep going and it'll be okay and we'll worry about that later. But until you sit with the painful things, until you sit with the hard things, it's hard to find your peace and your joy. So having lived that life for so long, I'll tell people it's worth it. It's worth it. I know it's hard, but I think it's really the only way through.
I mean, so well said to close it out as I knew it would be. It reminded me of that, the Asian art form where the vase is broken and then it gets put back together and it's actually more beautiful and more coveted because of that. And it makes me just want to remind everyone that just because the hard things have happened, first of all, they happen to everyone. And secondly, like, you're not broken because of it. And when you put it back together, it's actually a more beautiful thing. And so really want to appreciate you, Rob, Laura, for your generosity, your insights, your reflection, your time, and just everything that you give to folks, outside of this summit every day, all day. If you're not already following both of those folks and attending their events, it's really a gift to do that. So thank you both so much for reminding us that building a career in law doesn't have to mean following someone else's blueprint. So, whether it's portfolio work, branding work, thought leadership, entrepreneurship, there's more than one way to build a career that works for you. So thank you both for this. Now to our last segment of the day, the person who's gonna bring us home, and I'm handing it over to someone who's been absolutely instrumental in shaping everything that Goodlawyer stands for. I'm basically on video calls with him every single day, and now I have the benefit very shortly, once I hand it to him, to go see him in real life. Josh Weinberger is the COO of Goodlawyer. He's a former M&A lawyer. He's a builder. He's someone who deeply cares about making the profession better, more forward-thinking, more human, more effective. He's definitely one of the most curious folks that I've seen about understanding other people's challenges, trying to reflect it back to them to make sure he's captured it so that he can help them. And I'm always impressed by that. So I'm going to turn to Josh now, who's going to leave us with some closing thoughts and a challenge for all of us moving forward. Josh, the mic is yours.
Not to inspire you one more time. I think we've already had plenty of that today. My role is to connect the dots, to help us move from what we've learned today to how we actually lead tomorrow. Last year, I spoke about self-awareness as the foundation for meaningful change, the mirror we hold up before we can grow. Last year was about seeing ourselves clearly. This year is about what we do with what we see, and why self-awareness must become self-expression. This year, I'm talking about what happens when the mirror shows us something we didn't want to see. My mirror revealed anger. Not the explosive kind, no table slamming or shouting, more like a background static that hums quietly through my day. I feel it when I'm rushing from one meeting to the next, when something small doesn't go as planned, or when someone circles back on something they never circled to in the first place. It's not dramatic, just constant, quiet, and draining. I don't like being angry. So where does it come from? Is it age, fatigue? Is it algorithms? Is it the pressure of perfectionism? Maybe it's all those things. Wherever it comes from, what I've realized is this: the more I try to avoid, suppress, or deny my anger, the stronger it gets. Here's a loop I keep finding myself in. Maybe you know it too. Something bothers me, a missed expectation, a clumsy comment, a tension that should probably be addressed. But I tell myself, it's not worth the conflict. I bury it. And I tell myself, that's maturity. I'm being stoic, professional, the bigger person, but I'm not. I've just banked resentment. And resentment is like compound interest. You always pay for it over time. So as my balance grows, it leaks unintentionally, manifesting as impatience, sarcasm, sharpness, or withdrawal. And before I know it, everyone who I interact with is paying for it too. So lately I've been trying to understand what this pattern is really about. And here's what I keep coming back to. Anger isn't the problem. It's just information, a signal. It's the body's way of saying that something isn't aligned here. Now, as lawyers, we don't acknowledge anger because it doesn't fit with our professional persona, the unemotional, the composed, the unflappable advisor. So instead of responding to the body's call for action, we're trained to hit the brakes, to ignore it, to bury the emotion in the name of professionalism. No wonder so many of us burn out. Anger, properly understood, isn't weakness or a lack of discipline. It's a stimulant for action. It helps clarify what we value and where our boundaries are. So the real work isn't to suppress anger. It's to notice it, name it, and direct it. Because when anger is acknowledged, it can become fuel. When it's ignored, it manifests like poison. I'm trying not to hide my anger anymore. I'm trying to work with it, to turn my developing self-awareness into conscious expression. Not through deep breathing or meditation, though I have tried both, but through something harder. Assertive communication. This is not the kind of communication that wins arguments. It's the kind that prevents arguments from turning into cold wars. Assertiveness lives in the space between silence and aggression. It's about saying what's true without turning it into a weapon. For me, that often sounds like, I'm frustrated about how that went. Can we talk about what happened? Instead of, forget it, it's fine. It's hard, especially for those of us conditioned to smooth things over. But I've learned that diplomacy without honesty isn't professionalism at all. It's performance, and that's exhausting. So now, when I feel that anger arise, I try to pause and acknowledge it. Sometimes that awareness alone is enough to stop me from defaulting to avoidance. Other days I blow it, but at least I'm noticing the pattern, and that awareness is progress. The older I get, the more I realize that being a good lawyer, leader, or teammate isn't about keeping the peace. It's about staying connected to the people, to the work, and to the issues that matter, even when things get emotional, angry, or uncomfortable. Through sport, big law, and now entrepreneurship, I've seen that good teams can handle conflict, especially when it's grounded in mutual respect and shared values. But even great teams, filled with talent and good intentions, will fall apart when they really stop talking. When the conversations become performative instead of authentic. When we trade emotional honesty for momentary harmony. So that's what today's really been about, learning how to lead and collaborate differently. We've spent this summit talking about change, how to innovate, how to lead, how to reimagine the practice of law. But none of that sticks if we don't integrate it. And integration isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's emotional work. You can't build trust while burying tension. You can't innovate if your team avoids conflict. And you can't lead if you don't stay connected when it's uncomfortable. That's what I'm still wrestling with. How to turn self-awareness to self-expression without retreating back to avoidance. I'm figuring it out. But I've noticed that every time I engage, early, honestly, and respectfully, the anger dissipates. Not because I've mastered it, but because it's been heard. So as you leave this summit and return to the clients, the teams, the inboxes, and the commitments that are waiting for you tomorrow, I'd ask you to reflect on one question. What emotion are you avoiding right now? Because understanding that emotion is probably where your growth lives. Avoiding it may buy you momentary comfort, but confronting it with courage, with clarity, and without judgment will buy you peace. Last year, I said self-awareness is the foundation of growth. This year, I'll add turning self-awareness into self-expression. That's how we lead ourselves, our teams, and our industry forward. I don't have it all figured out, not even close. I'm still wrestling with my own avoidance, still learning to turn emotion into effective action. But maybe that's what leadership really is. Not perfection, but persistence. The daily work of showing up, owning our mess, and trying again. Thank you.
Nice finish, bro. Wow. Thank you, Josh. We knew it would be a powerful way to close. It was. And it's the perfect reminder that the biggest risk in law isn't change, it's standing still. Pauline?
All I can say is yes, yes, yes. Exactly what Chad just said. It's not just up to the next generation. It's up to all of us to pave the good path forward now for the generations to come. We need to challenge assumptions. We got to redesign what leadership looks like and build a profession that actually works for the people in it now and those who join us in the future.
Just want to take a moment to say thank you for every single one of you who joined us today. There's so many things you could have been doing, but over 2,000 folks tuned in from across Canada, the US, and the world. Whether you're watching yourself with your popcorn, with your team, one of our summit lounges, we felt your energy in the chat on screen all day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, thank you. To all of our incredible panelists and your speakers, thank you for sharing your stories, your insights, your honesty. You made today what it was, and my heart and my brain are just too full, too full. To our amazing sponsors, we are so grateful for your support. Our flagship sponsor, Castles, and our partner sponsors, Wordsmith, Miller Thomson, Thomson Reuters, MLT Aikens, ACC Ontario, and ACC British Columbia. This summit does not happen without you. Thank you.
And to the folks behind the scenes, two people who poured their hearts into making this entire experience possible. Angie Chu.
Angie, get out here. Come on.
Your vision, creativity, attention to every detail made this happen. Thank you for everything. Things like this feel smooth because of the effort that you put in every day for months. And Lori Roberts for helping make the summit happen on top of the 3 other jobs that we ask you to do every day. Your energy to bring Goodlawyer to life is incredible. And to our entire Goodlawyer team who's here, back in Calgary, in Vancouver, you continue to change lawyer lives. You move our industry forward no matter the challenge that's in front of us.
And now, we want to bring everyone back up for one last goodbye. So come join us on stage, everybody. Come on,
Lori. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, thank you.
Where is Bigsy?
Bringing people in, but a little slow to get there.
Yeah.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us so much. We hope that you have an incredible rest of your day. Let us know your reflections, your insights. Drop it in LinkedIn post. We've got incredible merch for you. We actually now have an entire separate event to run later tonight.
Yay!
The first Future of Law Awards.
Very cool.
Is this the sign up?
Yay!